scared away a little.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, we talk to the Communication Workers of America's Southern Region Vice President, Brother Richard Honeycutt, about the region-wide strike at AT&T. Firestone workers in Liberia are unionizing, and we should nationalize US Steel. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number, and the line is open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next program. Folks, if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining member of the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. And we've got some cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. We have our logo dad cap. We have some of our Join a Union t-shirts left, and pre-orders are open for our union-made matchbooks and a new t-shirt that says Unionize. Also, folks, we are in the middle of a fundraising drive. We have a goal of about $10,000. So if you could make a donation, tvlr.fm/union2024, we would greatly appreciate it. If you don't have the funds, then you can share our work and share the fundraiser, all that good stuff. Finally, if you're a member of a union, then you should think about getting your local to sponsor the show. Local sponsorships can be purchased for as little as $100 a month. So you can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey, and let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union brothers who are trying to put the South's labor movement on the map. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener. Thank you for spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Leanne, Jacob, not me, Benjo, and everybody else watching us on YouTube. If you haven't liked the stream yet, please go ahead and do that. And with that out of the way, here is what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from August 30th to September 6th. This is Last Week in Southern Labor. 599 workers in 10 bargaining units are in new union campaigns. 15 workers in one bargaining unit started and stopped a union campaign in the same week. And 22 workers in one unit are in a raid, and 74 workers in one unit are in a new decertification campaign. Starting off strong with 276 workers at UNFI in Sarasota, Florida, demanding voluntary recognition with the Teamsters Local 79. 121 workers workers at International Rescue Committee in Atlanta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Office and Professional Employees International Union, OPEIU, Local 179. OPEIU is on a tear organizing at this company. You can listen to our interview with IRC workers at Abilene, Texas, just ahead of the company voluntarily recognizing their union there. 64 workers at Rivers Casino in Portsmouth, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 822. 43 workers at Beat LLC in San Antonio, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with OPEIU, Local 4873. 19 workers at Starbucks in Orlando, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 15 workers at Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, in Leesburg, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. The United Government Security Officers of America, Local 387, is trying to raid a unit of 22 security guards at Allied Universal Security Services in Washington, D.C. from Union Rights for Security Officers, URSO. 8 workers at Bale Bros in Jonesboro, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 926. 7 workers at Northwood Health Systems in New Martinsville, West Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with apparently an independent union, Northwood Workers Union. Workers likely pushed by their employer and aided by the National Right to Work Foundation filed a petition to decertify the Teamsters, Local 988, as the union representing 74 workers at PepsiCo in Houston, Texas. 53 workers at Sigma Network in Kansas City, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 955. 15 workers at Herc Entertainment Services in Atlanta, Georgia, filed and then withdrew in the same week a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 728. 2 workers at Avis Rental Service in Louisville, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 89. In election results, 1,119 workers across 5 bargaining units are newly unionized last week. 20 workers in one unit withdrew their election petition, and 5 workers in one unit voted against unionization. 1,000 workers at Ultium Cells in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Ultium Cells is a joint venture owned in part by GM. Those workers have been voluntarily recognized by the company as they unionized with the United Auto Workers, UAW. 46 workers at the Texas Freedom Network in Austin, Texas, withdrew their petition for a union election with the United Professional Organizers because, according to the union in correspondence with the Valley Labor Report, they secured voluntary recognition. 20 workers at Did Lake in Virginia Beach, Virginia, withdrew their petition for a union election with the Public Service Employees Local Union 572, an affiliate of LIUNA. 11 workers at Starbucks in Clearwater, Florida, voted 8-1 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 30 workers at a Kroger fulfillment center in Forest Park, Georgia, voted 24-1 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters, Local 528. 32 workers at Piedmont Athens Regional Medical Center in Athens, Georgia, voted 20-9 in favor of unionization with IUOE, Local 926. And 5 workers at Ryder Transportation in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, voted 2-3 against unionization with the Teamsters, Local 89. In strikes and bargaining updates, the SPLC has a lengthy statement on Facebook and Twitter about the lingering effects of the massive layoffs in June affecting their immigration work, with several statements from former clients. CWA withdrew from mediations last week after saying that AT&T was only using mediation as a stall tactic and was still not bargaining in good faith. Subsequently, the company responded with a full offer for the first time in negotiations, according to the CWA, and told the union that they would keep negotiating, but then went around and told the media that it was the final offer. The CWA insists that the offer does not meet economic demands and that it continues to be committing unfair labor practices, which the union charged the company with earlier. The Association of Flight Attendants, AFA-CWA, members at United Airlines voted 99% in favor of authorizing a strike if necessary, demanding an industry-leading contract. Meanwhile, Teamsters at United Airlines, which are the aircraft maintenance workers, are also in negotiations and held rallies across the country, including in Florida, to demand a fair contract. Workers at the National Audubon Society, an environmental conservation organization where workers are unionized with the Bird Union, CWA, Local 1180, charged, and the NLRB agreed that the company is not bargaining in good faith. In response, the union will begin a 3-day strike next week, and the company is joining Tesla in arguing that the NLRB is unconstitutional. After a one-day unfair labor practice strike in May, staff at the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, International Union in D.C., unionized with the News Guild Local 32035, ratified a contract last week with higher wages, more telework, and more leave. Almost immediately after the Apple Retail Union, CWA, Local 6016, held an informational picket in front of the Apple retail store where they work in Oklahoma City and authorized a strike to protest the lengthy contract negotiations, which have been going on for 2 years. The bargaining committee secured a tentative agreement containing job protections, increased wages, and health insurance, becoming only the second Apple store in the United States to have a union contract. Members will vote on the tentative agreement on the 22nd of September. Nurses at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, voted 97% in favor of authorizing the bargaining team to call a strike if necessary, as they say that management is refusing to budge on key issues. In political and legislative updates, service workers, city workers, airport workers, and farm workers from across North Carolina gathered last week with the Durham Workers Assembly to demand the North Carolina Department of Labor pass OSHA guidelines to help keep workers safe from heat illness. Their testimonies included one of a worker who passed out from heat exhaustion in July. Kamala Harris has agreed to participate in a roundtable with the Teamsters International Union. The American Federation of Teachers put out a statement about the shooting in a Georgia school last week, mourning those affected and condemning politicians who oppose any form of gun control. Alabama lawmakers put the head of the Department of Corrections in the hot seat last week over continued violence in state prisons. One Alabama lawmaker wants to further restrict unemployment benefits in the state, which already have some of the most ungenerous policies in the country. The National Federation of Federal Employees, NFE, which represents many federal firefighters, say that the job classifications do not accurately reflect the responsibilities of its members, and as a result, they are not properly compensated. Biden officially proposed a measly 2% pay increase for federal employees last week, less than the average raise for all workers this year of 5.2%, and less than the average raise the year before of 4.6%. And despite the consumer price index having increased 2.9% over the last year. This falls well below the proposal from congressional Democrats of 7.4%. Federal unions criticized the proposal. The Alabama Political Reporter reached out for a response from the president of the North Alabama Area Labor Council to Governor Ivey's Labor Day message. My response was that if Ivey wanted to thank Alabama's workers, she could start by standing with her CWA constituents, striking against AT&T, a giant multi-billion-dollar corporation, but I won't be holding my breath. AFGE President Reverend Everett Kelly panned Elon Musk's idea of a Department of Government efficiency as just a way to make Musk and his friends richer. That wraps up Last Week in Southern Labor. If we missed anything, send us a message at tvlr.fm/contact and we'll include it in next week's roundup. We're going to take a break and be right back talking to CWA Southern Region Vice President Richard Honeycutt about the ongoing strike at AT&T. Stay tuned.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Cure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Cure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. If you have anything to add, 844-899-8857. If you would like to call in, the line is open. Before we get to CWA Region VP, Southern Region VP, Richard Honeycutt, we have a quick story out of Liberia. Let's play this clip. All right, so we're going to have to get some of that energy at our union rallies here in the States, because that looked incredibly fun. As you could tell, they were having a good time. That was a clip of Firestone workers from a plantation in Liberia about a week ago, just ahead of a historic vote among contract workers on the issue of union representation. Firestone, the tire maker, is the largest employer in Liberia, a country in Africa. Workers at Firestone have been largely unionized with the Firestone Agricultural Workers Union of Liberia, FAUL. For some time, in 2008, the union secured a collective bargaining agreement with the company after successfully unionizing in 2007, which is the first time that had happened at Firestone in the company's then 82-year history in Liberia. In that agreement and in successive agreements, workers directly employed by the company have been able to increase wages, reduce quotas, improve housing, and provide free school for the workers' children and free health care for the families. Prior to 2008, a human rights lawsuit against the company called out the company for engaging in the modern equivalent of slavery and for having children work alongside parents instead of attending school. However, starting in 2019, the company began going backwards instead of building on progress made with the workers. Since that year, the company has begun implementing American-style fissuring policies, contracting out jobs, and laying off others. According to the union, the company has cut 3,500 jobs since 2019 alone through these methods. In that 1 year alone, the company forced 2,000 of their directly employed workers to sign contracts with, quote, labor contractors after firing them. They then performed the same work that they had been doing previously for less pay, for no benefits, and for none of the protections of the union's collective bargaining agreement. These contract workers have begun fighting back, and just last week voted in by 90% to join the Firestone Agricultural Workers Union of Liberia, again, FAUL. Let's listen to the workers shortly after the votes were counted.
No. That's it. That's it well.
All right. Really exciting stuff there. They will now be fighting to win the same things in a new contract that the directly employed Firestone workers have had for nearly 2 decades. We'll keep an eye on that fight. We have on the line now the Southern Region Vice President for the Communication Workers of America, Brother Richard Honeycutt. Richard, welcome to the program.
For having me on.
Thanks for taking the time. I know that you're very busy. I know that here locally, 3905, their folks are incredibly busy, so I imagine it is the same or even more intense for you at the Southern Region Vice President level. So your members have been on strike now for about 3 weeks. Can you talk to us about how your members are feeling about the strike after it's been going on for this amount of time?
Well, I'll start off by saying, to that point, that is kind of a uncommon thing here in the Southeast. And so to have a strike going on this long, and I'll say the spirits are great. It's amazing what a company can do to motivate people and, through the way they treat them and the various things like that. But our people all throughout the Southeast, all 9 states are really fired up and showing out, for these picket lines and all the mobilization efforts that we have going on. I think we're making a really good showing. We're into our 3rd week now, and the spirit is still there. Everyone's staying strong.
Absolutely. The 3rd week is where, in a lot of times, the it starts to set in. Like that's when you don't get your paycheck, right, or you don't get your full paycheck from work, and you start collecting the strike pay, which is going to be a little bit less. And I've sensed that going on picket lines, even as the tone, the kind of mood is more serious. I have seen no interest in we just got to get back to work. Whatever the company offers, right? I mean, even as they're being more serious, it's kind of a little bit less jovial, right? There's still a strong determination to get, what they deserve. And here in our area, CWA Local 3905 told us on the radio when the strike began that they had a participation rate of 99% plus out of the bargaining unit. I mean, that is really astounding when you think about Alabama's a right-to-work state. You don't even have to be a member of the union here, much less participate in a strike, and they have 99% plus participation. And so far, my understanding is that has been maintained in 3905. Are you seeing similar rates of participation out of locals across the region?
Yeah, we are. And that's one of the things or reasons why it's been so amazing is we are 9 right-to-work states in the Southeast. And so, you're always kind of wondering, hey, what's going to happen if we get to a point like this? And it's held strong. I mean, we haven't seen much of a decline at all. In fact, I've gotten more reports recently of people who had crossed the picket line that are now coming back over and actually walking the picket line.
Wow.
And so it's a phenomenon, man. It's really amazing, at what we're seeing happening right now.
Yeah, that's really, really great to hear. And what about the community response? I know that here in Huntsville, I've been happy as the president of the Labor Council here to see a lot of support from other unions, from individuals in other unions. The Teamsters obviously not crossing the picket line, working for UPS. What about across the South? How has the community and the rest of the labor movement been responding?
Yeah, that's also been great. Which, any kind of strike or event like this, you've got to have the community support. To really make it effective. And so we, just like what happened in 2019, we're seeing the same exact thing. We've got businesses bringing food to the picket lines. We got other unions coming out, helping walk the picket line. I saw one thing that I did not see last time that was really pretty cool is in Kentucky. A picture was sent to us, and this church has their big billboard, like an electronic billboard, and they're actually have support, the 17,000 workers, on a ULP strike with AT&T. And so the community involvement has been outstanding. It really is. Unions in the South, sometimes that's a hard topic to talk about with our neighbors and friends, but what we've seen so far has been wonderful. I mean, we have gotten support from the public. I don't know, part of it is, our people are working in the neighborhoods, they know these people. And so that's part of it. And then I'm sure there's also quite a few people out there that just have a really dislike for AT&T. And so they probably enjoy that side of it also.
There you go. Well, outside of the community, we do have politicians, and basically every politician in the South and across the country. Just a few days ago on Labor Day, we're going on and on, right, about how great the American worker is, the Alabama worker, how Alabama doesn't work without its workers. That's what Governor Ivey said on Labor Day, and I'm sure there were very similar things and true things, right? Of course, Alabama does not work without its workers. Without the working class of Alabama, nothing moves, or the working class of Tennessee, right? Of course, this is all true. And so it would stand to reason if you actually believed that, right, as a governor of a state where now probably something like 1,000 CWA members across the state in Alabama and 17,000 across the region are on strike against this big multi-billion-dollar corporation, you would think, oh, I care about the workers. I want to thank them. I'm going to support them as they try to get a better contract. I've not seen any of that so far, so I'm just wondering, are you getting, any back channel support? Is Governor Ivey's office reaching out and say, hey, I can't say this because of my donors, but I support you. I want to let you know, I'll do whatever I can for you. Is that kind of stuff happening?
Yeah, no, we haven't heard from Governor Ivey, but she's more than welcome, to show up at any of the picket lines. I'm sure she'd be welcome to come out there. Unfortunately, I don't feel like we've gotten quite the support, that we should be getting, especially at a national level. And, the quick explanation for that is that, the strike that we're on is an unfair labor practice strike. And so that's going to involve the NLRB. And approximately like a week and a half ago, we also even had a mediator that came in. And once the mediator came in, that, in our opinion, slowed things down. I feel like the company was kind of hiding behind that. mediation process. But it also, what it did is it kind of made it tougher for some of the legislators to get actively involved, depending, what their roles are in government and all, because as you know, that's a federal process that they're going through, and they don't want AT&T to come back and try and say, hey, you came out in support, you're trying to manipulate, mediation, things like that. And that's also been the case, with being on the ULP strike. Once again, we're having to go through the board to, defend these charges or process these charges that we have filed against the company. And there's some fear of that. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're hearing. If it was an economic strike where, we're out because we want better wages, benefits, the things like that we could actually get out and talk about, I feel like the support would be better. But we have been getting support. I'm not going to say, it's nothing, in the various states. We've had, politicians come out, legislators come out and, walk some of the picket lines. We've had some write some statements, so there has been some participation, but unfortunately, like you said earlier, being in the South, we don't always, unions don't always have the support politically that we wish we did have.
Right. You mentioned that your strike is an unfair labor practice strike, and of course, we know what that is. But there are a lot of people in the audience that may not really understand exactly what that means or what the differences are between an unfair labor practice strike and an economic strike. Can you just explain that to our listeners really quick, and then what the specific charges against the company are?
Yeah. So like an economic strike would be one where, we were bargaining and we just couldn't get anywhere. And so we decided to, pull the people out, and based on, we want better wages, we want, whatever it might be, better work rules, et cetera. The ULP strike, or unfair labor practice strike, is geared around charges that were filed with the NLRB. And in the charges that we have, there's three main ones. The first one is that we're not bargaining with the actual decision makers at the bargaining team. That meaning, as we're sitting bargaining, we don't feel that the company has someone there that can actually say yes or no. They have to go back maybe one or two levels to get permission or an okay for something. Whereas our bargaining team, they're sitting there, they can decide, they were sent by, the members, the locals, and our chairs working with them. And we can make a decision on the fly versus them, AT&T, having to call Texas or whoever it might be. And so that's one of the charges. The other one is we feel, I won't get into this one too deep, but we feel like we had an agreement on a certain aspect of how healthcare would be bargained, and we feel that the company went back on that agreement. And so that's probably one of the main things right now that we're trying to deal with is get back to where we were, or how can we work through that. And so I would say that's the main. And then the third one is surface bargaining. We felt like the company has just been dragging this along for whatever reason. They, make small changes, on the top. It looks like they're trying to bargain, but the substance or the meat of it, we're not seeing it. It's just been like slow motion. And so that's the third charge, or third part of the charge.
Right. And then just another quick explanation for folks. Another difference between an unfair labor practice strike and an economic strike is that there are more protections for an unfair labor practice strike, right? So if you, even though the National Labor Relations Act protects supposedly your right to strike and says you cannot be fired for striking, the activist judiciary, the Supreme Court, came out with this McKay doctrine where if you go on an economic strike, you can theoretically be permanently replaced, quote unquote. And I think you have to have a fancy Harvard education to figure out what the difference is between being permanently replaced and being fired. But, I'll leave that up to our betters, I guess, on the Supreme Court. But on an unfair labor practice, you cannot even be permanently replaced, right? So you do have those sort of job protections that are not there legally in an economic strike, and so that is another important difference. And yeah, it is really frustrating that they're engaging in these sorts of tactics and not even getting to where you could go on an economic strike. And you could say that our disagreements right now are over the economics of the proposal. You're having a strike just to pressure them to bargain in good faith. I know that's a very frustrating position to be in. And, so with that with that kind of understanding among our listeners, we know right now that the strike is not over any particular wage or working condition proposal, but the union does have, I assume, some priorities that you took with you into negotiations. And presumably, the company has come forward with some of their priorities, what they would like to see. Could you, once CWA is able to stop AT&T from breaking the law and AT&T starts negotiating in good faith, could you tell us what some of the things the negotiating teams on either side are going to be pushing for?
Yeah, of course, there's a wide variety of things, but some of them are, I guess you would say, kind of the highlights or the main ones. As you said, we're on strike over ULP charges. I think you got that cleared up really well. And so going into bargaining, some of the issues that we were looking for, one is, of course, wage increases. I think, that's a hot issue with everyone. Looking at the cost of living and inflation, how things have gone over this past, couple years or so through COVID and all that, we're looking for, better wages. Also with healthcare, that's something that seems to be rising, and a lot of times the cost of the healthcare outpace the increases in the wages, and so that's another big issue. We also work rules, work home life balance. We have some of our technicians who the company has even came out across the bargaining table and named them as like 2 classes, and this one group is in the 2nd class, so almost like 2nd class employee. And that's honestly, that's how they're being treated. They're wire technician titles. And these techs, they come in 8 o'clock in the morning. They don't know if they're going to get home at 8 o'clock at night or if they're going to get home at 11 o'clock at night. It's a matter of just keep working and working. And so there's no work-life balance for them at all. There's been stories of, they talk about they have to literally raise their kids or, enjoy the T-ball game or the dance or stuff like that through FaceTime. And, there's just needs to be some more rules and guidelines around how these employees should be treated. We've also got, call centers where we have employees who are, held to these strict standards and monitored, like, almost have someone over their back watching what they're doing. And we just try to change some of the rules and take some of the stress off of them in that way. And of course, job protections to, call volumes and some guarantees around the work that they're doing, that it'll still be there, similar to what we have in some other contracts. Then we also have our utility workers or buried service wire guys who really save the money, an incredible amount of money. Instead of using contractors, they started using this buried service wire group back in the 90s, and they've kept using it because they know it saves them money. But at the same time, they're the lowest paid workers that AT&T has, and so there's just no fairness in what this company's doing. They're making billions every year. You can see what the CEO makes and all the higher ups, and it's just like, we are the workers, as you said earlier on Labor Day. Hey, Alabama, it takes the workers to make things go. And all of our members at AT&T are literally the face of AT&T. You know, someone might call it an issue or whatever, and they're talking to someone directly. Then they show up to their house. That's our technicians. And so this, you know, we are the face of AT&T. And instead of looking at us as a liability, you know, that we cost a salary, we cost this, it'd be nice if the company would turn around and actually look at the employees as an asset, because that's what they are. You know, they are more than just a technician. They are the face of AT&T.
Right. We're coming up about on how much time you said you have. I do have a couple more questions. Are you able to take those, or do you need to head out?
Yeah, I've got a couple more minutes.
Okay. So, you know, really quickly, I was on the picket line yesterday or the day before, and some of the workers were talking about AT&T supposedly talking to the media about having given a final offer, and CWA saying, no, it wasn't the final offer. We're still negotiating. They're still telling us at the table that we're still negotiating. Can you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, the company will come and they'll give the last and final best offer, and it's kind of like a take it or leave it. You know, we're done bargaining. You know, we're at an impasse. We're whatever. Here it is. And what they did, we don't consider to be that type of situation. They called it a final offer, but really it was just a ploy to, in our opinion, to get employees to come back to work by posting it. And, you know, employees thinking, oh, so we have a deal now, or this is it, you know, something like that. And that's not the case. And even after it was passed, we met that same day with the company, you know, at 11 o'clock that night. And so, you know, it was even stated that, you know, they knew they still had to bargain with us. So I think it was more of a ploy to maybe show, you know, the public, or, you know, even some of the employees that almost like trick them into thinking that we had some kind of deal, or that we were done bargaining. And that's not the case. We've been bargaining ever since then. We've been talking with the company. So.
And then finally, you know, AT&T and CWA did reach a tentative agreement in the Western region only a week or so before the strike began. Now, I don't think, and maybe it has been, it's been a few weeks now. I haven't seen anything about it, but I don't think it's been ratified by the members yet. But clearly, AT&T took a different bargaining position in the West than in the South. In the West, they seemed to be willing to bargain and agree to terms that at least the negotiating committee believed was acceptable. And yet here in the South, they aren't even doing the bare minimum that's legally required of them as far as bargaining is concerned. Not even talking about contract terms. We're not even there yet. They're just not even bargaining in good faith. Do you have any idea as to why AT&T is behaving so differently in different parts of the country?
It's really hard to say. And part of that reason is because of the different regions have different issues as far as what they're trying to bargain for. But I will give you a news update. I'm curious to see if AT&T is going to go back and update some of their previous statements, because they were real quick to express how, you know, maybe what's our issue, because they've gotten contracts, I think 3 other contracts or 4 covering X amount of employees, and they actually speak of the tentative agreement that they got in District 9 out in the West. Well, yesterday that tentative agreement was voted down, almost like 2-1 employees.
Almost what?
Like 2-1.
Wow.
It was voted down big time. And so, you know, they were out touting about how great, you know, all this stuff was. And I mean, the employees just answered it really big. You know, they're not happy with what the company thought was a great deal. And so at this point, they're going to have to go back and, you know, sit down at the bargaining table and rediscuss some of the things. So what they thought they had, they don't actually have.
Well, there you go. That is a news update. Literally just yesterday. Yeah, see this press release from CWA on September 6th. So we'll say, I imagine that adds some increased pressure on them to start negotiating with y'all, because they're not. I assume they're not going to want strikes in 2 parts of the country at once, especially when one covers California. I imagine they got a lot of customers out there.
Yeah, we have they've sent some of their managers after we went on strike, to the southeast to work. So I guess those guys might be getting a chance to go back home now, see their family.
All right. Well, CWA region, Southern Region Vice President Richard Honeycutt, thank you so much for taking the time and being generous with it. Apologies for going a little long, but best of luck. Keep it up. Thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to hopefully seeing a quick resolution to the strike.
Thank you, Jacob, and I would like to thank everyone listening that has given support to our strikers out there and participate in the picket lines and various things that y'all have done. So thank you all, and hope you have a good day.
All right, appreciate it. Again, that was the Southern Region Vice President Richard Honeycutt for the Communication Workers of America. 17,000 AT&T workers represented by CWA are now on strike across the South, and just yesterday, CWA members at AT&T in the Western region voted down their tentative agreement. So AT&T is now going to be back at the bargaining table with the CWA Western region as the Southern region is on strike. 2-1. Wow. That's a big update. So.
Yeah. I was glad to hear that spirits are high, though the community support they're receiving. Not surprised that politicians are not really jumping up and down to support our brothers and sisters on the line, but really glad to see the community support. And North Alabama Area Labor Council, I know many of our members and affiliates have been out there visiting folks. We've been getting updates regularly. I know some of my folks at Alabama Rise were visiting picket lines yesterday, and really just proud to see that. And I also want to lift up that the North Alabama DSA has raised a couple $100 already, and I believe that fundraiser is still open. I do know CWA has just now launched an official strike fund that you can donate to. I just got that email a day or two ago. So there is now an official CWA donation link if you would like to chip in a couple bucks to help these 17,000 workers that are on strike. And like I said, good job to North Alabama DSA for raising a couple $100 also here in the local community. And again, just shout out to all the people who have been visiting picket lines and dropping off waters and Gatorades and snacks, and signing the petition, sharing on social media, doing what you can just to lift up this struggle, because these 17,000 workers across the South really deserve our support and our solidarity.
Absolutely. So we have been we haven't been following this story super closely, but we've been keeping an eye on it, right? And that story is about Nippon, the Japanese steel company, attempting to purchase US steel. Of course, the United Steelworkers have been opposed to the purchase of US steel by Nippon, and many politicians, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, have been opposed to Nippon purchasing US steel, varyingly along, for so-called national security issues or for like wage and working condition type issues. And on the latter, Nippon has not been making it easy on people who care about the working conditions of people at U.S. Steel to agree to the deal, because even as they say we will respect any existing contracts that workers have with U.S. Steel, they are not. They have made no commitments to continue to negotiate in good faith, to continue to renew contracts, to continue to respect and recognize the union, and continue to make investments in the United States or anything like that. They're just not making commitments like that. And so it very much makes sense that on those grounds, the workers of U.S. Steel, represented by the United Steelworkers, have been opposed to the deal. And just last week, President Biden announced that he would oppose the sale. He will not allow the sale to go through. That was his announcement last week. It was a pretty had a lot of finality to it, more or less saying, the conversations are done. I'm not going to allow this sale to go through on national security grounds. Is what Biden was leaning on there, and This from the American Prospect, although this has been reported elsewhere, but this language is coming from the American Prospect. Harold Meyerson wrote a piece on it. As news of the Biden administration's rejection of the Nippon bid became public yesterday, US Steel CEO David Burritt lashed out at the union, threatening to close the company's last remaining Pittsburgh mill, transfer the work to its new non-union mill in Arkansas, and also move its headquarters, which has anchored Pittsburgh's business community since 1901, to the non-union South as well. The last threat appears to be Burritt's way of retaliating against Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro as well, who, like virtually every political leader in the region, opposed the pending sale to Nippon. Now, this is blackmail, frankly, because we are not talking here about, we're going to be making these decisions because it is necessary. There's not even a pretense from David Burritt, the US Steel CEO. There's not even a pretense of saying, if we do not move our work from the last remaining mill in Pittsburgh that US Steel has to a non-union mill in Arkansas, the company will go bankrupt. There's no even pretense of that. It is completely in retaliation for the right concern of workers and political leaders in Pennsylvania and across the country about the ramifications of a sale to a foreign company of, a real institution in the United States, US Steel, right? There is correct concern about that. And there is not even being made a pretense of saying that this is about economics or the necessity of the business. It's just totally retaliation against the union and political leaders in the communities that have given their lives, have formed themselves around this institution, saying that we will do everything we can to destroy the economic life of a community because we are not getting our way and because I'm not going to be made a little bit more rich. Blackmail, economic terrorism, as maybe Teamsters President Sean O'Brien would say. It should not be tolerated, and frankly, if there are any moves made in this direction by US Steel, the United States government should nationalize it. We should not allow people like this, powerful millionaires or billionaires, I don't know if David Burritt has $1 billion or not, but we should not allow people like him to single-handedly threaten the economic life of an entire community, of an entire country, because he is not getting his way. And because the line is not going to go up as high for him. We should nationalize it. We should take over as a government, US Steel, and the government should run it. We can do this through the Defense Production Act. We can do this through various other national security concerns. Probably what would happen if something like this were to ever be proposed is that the shareholders would be compensated at a fair market rate for their shares in US Steel. But frankly, for people like David Burritt, for anybody on the executive board of US Steel, I would say that we should not reimburse them at a fair market rate for their shares in US Steel. We should just expropriate it and take it and not give them anything for it and say that you're lucky that for your threats of blackmail and economic terrorism that you do not get jail time, right? I mean, that should be the deal. You don't get anything, you're welcome for existing in this country and profiting off of the labor of hundreds of thousands of steel workers across the country and across the decades. We should just take it. The U.S. government runs several institutions and runs them well, contrary to the consistent cries of conservatives. The United States Postal Service can get a letter across the country for 67 cents. And prior to Trump appointee Louis DeJoy, was able to do it for 50 cents. There's several institutions that the U.S. government and various state and municipalities run and run well. We could obviously do something like this. The only thing that's stopping it is the political imagination and people, it's just not being put out there. So I want to put it out there. I want to, if any of Biden's handlers or advisors or whatever are listening, they should consider this as a very serious threat. And they should execute on it. Because we should not allow economic royalists, as FDR said, to play games with people's lives in this way. It just should not be allowed. And so that's what we should do about it. We should nationalize it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also just want to point out the issue where the non-union South, yet again,
right.
The South is being used as a bastion for, this kind of reactionary garbage. And, the South is being used as a refuge to run away from unions. In this race to the bottom to exploit workers, to pay lower wages, less benefits, less rights, less protections. And, so that's part of, I think, what motivates me, and I hope motivates a lot of folks who are listening, is, we can't allow the South to be that way.
Right.
As long as the South is that refuge for, greedy capitalists like this guy, it's going to continue to drag the whole country down.
Yeah.
And we suffer along with everyone else. So, I saw a comment in the chat, we need to unionize the place in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We absolutely do. And that has to be part of the problem, or part of the plan, is organizing in the South so that these kind of threats are a little bit emptier. Right, because this is not a new idea.
Right.
A lot of the manufacturing and industry that we have in the South that has relocated here over the past few decades, was running away from unions and running away from organizations. So we have got to address that. But yeah, to your broader point, I totally agree. I think there's plenty of rationale where it makes sense. And, it's important to the country and to the economy. So I think we all have a vested interest.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be nationalization. We could just give ownership over to the workers as well. Look, I'm a moderate. I can be persuaded. Nationalization or worker ownership, those are the options that I would propose in response to the blackmail and terrorism of
right.
Of
let them choose between the two. Right. We love choice.
Or we could even go a third way and give 50% of the ownership to the workers and 50% to the United States government.
Wow. Now you're talking a lot of choice.
Yes.
That's one more choice than we typically have for things, at least for president, right? But so, yeah, that's interesting. I'm down for it. Yeah, put it on the table. It would be nice if we had politicians that were, advocates of policies like that, advocates of taking on big capital in a way that would empower working people. We'll see.
And then once we do that, once we take over US Steel by one avenue or another, or both, worker ownership or nationalization, we should invest in the quote-unquote non-union South. But we should do it with good-paying union jobs instead of exploiting Southern workers as a threat against Northern and Western and Midwestern workers. We should do it in a spirit of cooperation. We should invest in the South, in economically impoverished regions in the South, and we should continue to invest in the people who made and sacrificed for U.S. Steel for the entirety of its existence. Gosh, getting tongue-tied. In Pittsburgh. We should do all of it, and we should invest in the latest state-of-the-art kind of technology to make the work less dreary, and we should we should redound the benefits of that technology and automation once it's nationally owned to the workers, instead of making those benefits go to the profits of people like David Burritt. And by the way, while we're talking about it, I've been reading some about the history of the steel industry in the United States. And, contra whatever you hear about the workers were the ones that, are responsible for the decline of the U.S. Steel and the United States steel industry writ large. Actually, the business journals of the time typically did not blame the workers. They blamed the business and management practices of the notoriously conservative U.S. Steel. And I say conservative temperamentally, not as in like politically they vote Republican. Conservative as in they did not want to make capital investments, which I'm always told capital investment and risk is the whole reason that we give these people the profits of other folks' labor is because they make risks in capital investment, and the people in charge of the U.S. steel industry refused to make these capital investments. Instead of investing in the latest state-of-the-art technologies and automation and things like this, they just built more factories that were already obsolete by global standards when they were built in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, right? And so that is a big reason, because once we passed, obviously passing NAFTA in and of itself was bad, but once NAFTA was passed and the U.S. steel industry was no longer so insulated from the rest of global steel production, it was no longer even remotely competitive, not because of the wages, or at least not majorly because of the wages and benefits that workers got, but because it just took more time to make steel in the U.S. because of the refusal of the capitalists to invest, which is funny. And that's actually typically what you see when any time I have ever heard of, the unions killed this industry. Anytime I've ever heard of that and I've actually taken the time to look, that it's not true. It's just straight up it's a lie.
Turns out not everyone's good at business.
Yeah.
And just because you have a business doesn't make you successful at it at the long term, right? Some people think that like you have this right to sit on your business forever and ever. And we're supposed to be shocked and surprised and saddened when a business closes. But yeah, I mean, to your point, sometimes industry kills industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes their own mismanagement, their lack of forward thinking, their lack of, future minded investments, their lack of taking care of their own workforce, all sorts of issues, just all sorts of issues can arise. But yeah, I'm with you. I've never encountered a situation where you could say, yep, it was those greedy union workers that killed this industry. As soon as you scratch beneath the surface of that BS rhetoric, you find out that is not really the case.
Right.
And so, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back. We've got some news about Ultium Cells. We talked about it last week in Southern Labor. We got a clip. We got a clip for you. We've also got Boss Watch. As always, bosses are breaking the law in the South. We're going to tell you about it. So stay tuned, folks. We still got another few segments left in the first half of the program. In the second half of the program, we got a lot of really cool stuff. We're going to be talking to APWU National President Mark Dimondstein about some of the latest developments in Israel. The Israeli unions going on a general strike, calling on a ceasefire. It's a little bit more complicated. It's not necessarily for the Palestinians, but, it's an interesting development nevertheless. We're going to be talking to Sophie Miriam about a bunch of stuff, workers in Colorado and Alabama and some of the similarities. So we got a really cool overtime lined up for you. So, you're going to want to make sure that you check that out, Facebook, YouTube, the Valley Labor Report, after we go off of the air here on the first half of the program. But we still have a couple good segments left for you in the first half. So stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Don't go anywhere.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger food drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. We're on the radio in Kentucky and Louisiana as well. Pretty sure we're the only union radio programs in those states, but I know it for a fact here in Alabama. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We got a lot of folks tuning in to us on the YouTube. Appreciate everybody. The Roswell Hub gave us a heart. Big fans of those folks. There's some Teamsters out in Atlanta who have a YouTube channel and regularly put out some really good educational stuff. They're much less news focused than we are, and it's more about education, specifically targeting UPS Teamsters, how to file a grievance, what some of the issues are, that the UPS Teamsters are facing across the country. So it's really good. Recommend it if you're a UPS Teamster. Andrew says, this channel is based out of Alabama. Indeed, it is. That's kind of bonkers that you are listening and don't know that.
That's like the whole thing, basically. Union Joe says solidarity. Alex says good morning. Andrew asks, Alabama has Carnal Littles on YouTube that promised to do interviews of disenfranchised vets and seniors 7 months ago and then never did. Never heard of that channel. Hey from Heather says thank you kindly for compiling this information about last week in Southern labor. You're very welcome.
Make sure you sign up for the newsletter.
Sign up for the newsletter, tvlr.fm/contact. Jav Sanch says SoCal Gas is going on strike. If anybody from that strike is listening, either while we're live or later, call in. If we're live, we'll take your if you call in while we're live, we'll try to take the call, talk about the strike. And if you call in later and leave a voicemail, we'll play it on the next show. Andrew asks, is this a pro-Biden channel? No, not really. As Adam said in the chat, we are pro-worker, not pro-politician. We will tell you, talk policy with you. F YouTube censorship, in reply to that comment, said, my dad worked for AT&T 23 years. They forced him to retire in the 90s and pushed all the union guys out. Some things never changed about the interview that we had with the CWA fellow. And then in response to is this a pro-Biden channel, he said, Biden's been the most pro-labor president of any of our lives. He walked the picket line. He's my president. I blocked Andrew. There you go.
Fun stuff happening in the
YouTube chat. Yeah, for sure. Brandon says, good morning, TVLR, in solidarity with CWA workers on strike from an Amazon Teamster. Thank you, Brandon. Pisa Clayton Triple D, can we get Midwest and West Coast unions to chip in for the strike fund? I'm sure they have. I would be shocked if they have not. Regarding my nationalized US Steel segment, got a lot of hell yeahs in the comment from Jacob, not me, Leanne, and others. Yeah, there you go. Quirky Geek Girl says, good morning from the Great White North. And Pisa Clayton Triple D said, why would a union knowingly kill the industry they invested their labor in? Exactly. It's such a silly argument that people make. But people make it, so we have to respond to it. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if anybody wants to call in. 844-899-8857. The UAW just organized a battery plant in Tennessee, just outside of the GM plant in Spring Hill, where they already represent a few thousand workers. And this Ultium is a joint venture between GM and some foreign auto manufacturer. I can't recall. Or maybe it's LG. I think it's LG. It's a joint venture between LG and GM. And in the GM contract, as well as in the other contracts, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, they were able to secure card check agreements in the contract that says, in any other of your, plants that you own or that you're in a joint venture with, you have to give us card check and the ability to come in to the National Master Agreement. And I think it's like at 75% of the wages and benefits of the National Master Agreement, with the intent of getting them up to 100% in the next round of negotiations. I think that's it. I'm not totally sure. But I do know that, there have been articles about the new contract that Ultium Cells workers are going to be working under. And the minimum wage in the plant, I think, is immediately going up to like $26 an hour. So, just a 35% raise immediately. Really life-changing amounts of money for these folks. And really excited for them. It's 1,000 workers in this battery manufacturing plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee. The company voluntarily recognized them as they agreed to in the national contract with the UAW. And so here's a clip that the UAW put out after they got their voluntary recognition.
Our rules change on a day-to-day basis.
The rules can change overnight, and you just have to adapt to them.
Production workers are out there 12 hours a day, standing on concrete, no ergonomic mats, no stools, no chairs.
I see a lot of young guys come in and be treated unfairly.
I think it's going to be big and very beneficial to everyone involved.
Just being unionized in general, we're able to reap the benefits as far as health care, our pay, and just overall having decency within the workplace. Not just for us, but for the future generation.
You're grouped together and you can stand up as one.
That's the power of being a union. Instead of just one stick, you got several. You can't snap several sticks, but you can snap one.
We're coming together with a solid purpose. When we're all said and done, we're on the same path, and that's what I like. Solidarity.
Exciting clip there. The UAW always has good videos around their organizing campaigns. And they started off talking about the work rules and how they're always changing. And that's something that is really not covered enough by the media when we're talking about, unions or union campaigns or contract negotiations or things like this. They always focus on the raises, and it's good, right? I mean, these people are getting a 30% raise. I mean, that's good and that's huge, and people ought to know that. And people ought to know that a union can get you a 30% raise immediately, right? I mean, that's important. But also important is that under a union contract, management cannot arbitrarily change the conditions of your work. They cannot arbitrarily change the conditions under which you spend the majority of your waking life for most of us, right? And if you don't work in a union workplace with a union contract, then you work in a place where your management can do that, where they can change anything and everything about the conditions of your work, where you spend the majority of your waking life for any reason or no reason at all to anything that they want. They can come in and they can say tomorrow, actually, instead of making $20 an hour, we just want to pay you $10. We only want to pay you $10 an hour. Your choices are to keep working here or to quit today and then try to find another job, which maybe you'll be able to find another job, but then you will also still be under those conditions where you have no say over what happens to you at work unless you are able to find a union job. And that's, it's so important, because I really do think that we as workers in the United States have just allowed ourselves to become acculturated to this idea that that's normal, it's natural, that I should be lorded over by my betters for the majority of the time that I'm conscious, that I should have no say over what happens the majority of the time that I'm conscious, and that's just the way that it is, because I'm not good enough to be able to govern myself or to have a voice on the job. I'm just not good enough. I'm not smart enough. My coworkers aren't good enough. My coworkers are not smart enough. We need people better than us to lead us. And that's just not the case. That is just simply not the case. And the older you get and the more you get into rooms with people who are powerful and who are making decisions, the more you should realize that. Because as I get older, right? I'm not old. I'm still young. I still think I'm very young, but I have gotten more and more experience, and I have been in more and more rooms over the last few years with people who have significant power over the lives of others. Significant power. And the more that I'm in the room with these people, it's not necessarily that I think that they're evil or they're bad or they're stupid or anything. It's just the more convinced I become that they are not any better than us. Seriously. The people who run our society are the exact same kinds of people as the ones at the bottom who are actually doing the work. It just so happens that the people at the top were able to get there. They're not any better than the rest of us. They're not any smarter than the rest of us. They're not any, they're the same kinds of people. And we should not allow them to run our lives without any sort of accountability or democratic control over the decisions that they make. We shouldn't give them carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want. And so I was really glad to see the UAW put that in and emphasize that as the opening, thing, right? That was the first thing that they mentioned, why we're unionizing, because we don't want to go into work every single day and something is different about the way that I work. And they're always changing these work rules. And I never know what I'm going to be doing when I come in. Now they're not going to have to deal with that anymore. And that's pretty freaking awesome, I think.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So shout out to the UAW for, getting that in the contract language and making this union victory successful. I think that's a huge win. You said over 1,000 workers, right? This is in, the clean energy sector where we're going to see more and more growth. We need to see those as good union jobs. And, to your broader point, though, like, I think in America, we love to talk about freedom and democracy and our rights. Don't tread on me. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, a lot around here. Don't tread on me.
Unless you're my boss.
Unless you're my boss, right? Yeah. I mean, we talk about freedom and democracy, but in the workplace, it's a dictatorship. Unless you have union power, unless you have some way of you and your coworkers coming together to negotiate collectively, right? It is a dictatorship in the workplace. And management can change what they want to change when they want to change it, however they want to. And yeah, you either tough it out or you quit and go back out into the marketplace and hope the next situation isn't as bad. And so I also want to say on that note, if you are in one of those situations, I would encourage you to organize before you decide to quit. We've heard a lot over the last few years about the Great Resignation. I'm not sure if that's still really happening these days, but I do know that a lot of people get really frustrated with their jobs, and because most jobs suck, and because it is a dictatorship, like I described. And so, if you are at that point where you're considering quitting your job, consider organizing your job. I really, really can't emphasize that enough, because in order to make things better in this country, we have to grow union power. We have to organize more workers. We have to have more workers in unions. The unions we have to be stronger and more militant. And the folks who are already in unions have to step up their involvement in the unions to make them stronger and more militant. And we have to grow this movement. So, if you are a non-union worker and you're not happy with your job, consider organizing, consider talking to your coworkers, reaching out to a union. It is definitely possible. It may not be easy, but it is worth it. And these workers here in Tennessee are proving, why it's worth it. Not just the immediate raises, but the security and dignity and respect that comes with having a union in the workplace.
Exactly. So, Boss Watch, folks, this is the mirror image of last week in Southern labor, and we like to give you a little bit of both, what were workers up to and what were bosses up to, and we've got a bunch of stories for you. Not going to get to all of them, I don't think. Maybe we will. We'll have to see how quick it is. But yeah, so here's what bosses in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to last week. Over in Texas, the U.S. Department of Labor has recovered over $100,000 in back wages for 38 workers employed by a South Lake landscaping company that misclassified them as an independent contractors and by doing so denied them overtime pay. The department's Wage and Hour Division determined that JP Above and Beyond Landscaping's violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act included failing to pay them overtime at time and a half, an employee's rate of pay for hours over 40 in a work week, and not keeping accurate records. Misclassifying employees as independent contractors is a serious problem that deprives workers of their hard-earned wages, benefits, and protections, said Wage and Hour Division District Director Jesus A. Valdez in Dallas. JP Above and Beyond Landscaping has learned that there are costly consequences for their violations. We encourage all employers to use our online tools or contact us to better understand laws governing their pay practices. Over in Oklahoma, AG Equipment Company, a Broken Arrow, an Oklahoma compressor packaging manufacturer, violated federal law when it fired 10 employees for failing to receive a COVID-19 vaccination because of their religious beliefs, the U.S. EEOC charged in a lawsuit filed today. According to the EEOC's lawsuit, in the fall of 2021, AG Equipment mandated all employees receive a COVID-19 vaccination and told workers no exceptions would be permitted for any reason. Nonetheless, 10 employees submitted written requests seeking exemptions based on their religious beliefs or medical conditions. The company refused to discuss the employees' requests or explore possible accommodations and fired the 10 individuals on October 15th, 2021, along with 77 other unvaccinated workers. And this is something that people did not either pretended not to know or really didn't know about the so-called federal vaccine mandate. It was not a vaccine mandate at all. It was a get vaccinated or mask mandate. There was never a mandate to vaccinate by the federal government. It was either get vaccinated or wear a mask. So there were always alternative accommodations that workers could utilize if and that companies could utilize. But nevertheless, while the law does not require employers to grant every request for religious or disability accommodation, they generally must do so when an accommodation can be provided reasonably and safely, said Andrea G. Barron, regional attorney for the EEOC's St. Louis district. Title VII requires employers to take workers' religious beliefs seriously and communicate with employees to determine whether effective, reasonable accommodations are available. David Davis, director of the EEOC's St. Louis district office, said workers are not required to set aside their religious beliefs when they walk in the door at work. Employers must work with employees when accommodations are requested and explore whether adjustments are possible and reasonable. And it seems like a big reason that the EEOC says that this company did not meet that requirement is that they didn't even discuss or consider. They rejected the request for accommodation out of hand. Over in Tennessee, the U.S. Department of Labor has recovered $31,000 in back wages and damages from a Tennessee operator of assisted living communities that illegally fired one worker for questioning the employer's pay practices and denied full overtime wages to 7 care workers. The department's Wage and Hour Division found that Family First LLC, owner of Bailey Manor, terminated an employee who questioned the facility's pay practices. Investigators also determined the employer did not include pay for time spent on call when calculating overtime wages for 7 employees at its Manchester location for hours over 40 in a work week. The Wage and Hour Division will not tolerate employers that intimidate and retaliate against workers or deprive them of their legally earned wages, said Wage and Hour Division Director Lisa Kelly in Nashville, Tennessee. In addition to protecting workers' rights, workers' wages, federal law forbids employers from taking action against employees because they engage in protected activities, such as asking about their pay, filing a complaint, or cooperating with a U.S. Department of Labor investigation. The division recovered $30,000 in back wages, liquidated and punitive damages for the employee wrongly terminated, and $1,700 in back wages and liquidated damages for 7 other employees. Have a few dishonorable mentions. The EEOC filed suit against Epic Food Hall, spelled with a Q, if you can imagine that, in Eastern Virginia, and its successor company after the owner subjected a black general manager to numerous derogatory racial comments, telling him that he, quote, looked like he spoke thug language, and referring to him as the N-word, made frequent disparaging remarks about black customers and employees, calling them, quote, not smart, ignorant, ghetto, and riffraff, and canceled live music and karaoke events that attracted predominantly black patrons because of the persistent racism and lack of a complaint procedure or a human resources department. The general manager was forced to resign. The EEOC filed suit against River's Edge Bar in Tampa, Florida, after one of its owners subjected female employees to a sexually hostile work environment. One of the restaurant's owners, who owns the bar with 2 of his brothers, openly and on a daily basis made sexually charged comments, propositioned his female employees to have sex with him, and touched and groped female employees without their consent. The other 2 owners witnessed the conduct but failed to take action. When a female employee complained about the harassment, she was terminated. Sexual harassment continues to be a pervasive issue in the restaurant industry, said Kristen M. Fosslid, regional attorney for the EEOC's Miami district, and employers who utilize their positions of power to prey on vulnerable restaurant workers will be held accountable under the law. You know, that's something that people really do not take into account when they talk about, restaurant work as work for children, as appropriate work for children. There is no other industry in the country that in which workers experience more sexual harassment than the restaurant and service industry. That's just a fact. We got a couple more dishonorable mentions, but you'll have to subscribe to our newsletter to find them. Adam, do you have any plugs this week?
I just want to remind folks to go to labornotes.org/events. There's lots of great online trainings coming up, including this month. They have stewards workshops and others. October 19th is the Alabama Troublemaker School. The registration page for that is live. It's online, so you can go to labornotes.org/events. You can find that. Really excited about that event. It's going to be a Saturday, October 19th in Birmingham. All you labor folks are invited. make sure you show up. If you are within driving distance of Birmingham, we want to see you there. Going to be a lot of great training, workshops, panels, presentations, but also just lots of great networking and opportunities to build connections with other brothers and sisters across this movement. So really looking forward to that. And that was my main plug.
Well, there you go. Make sure you do go to the Troublemaker School. It's going to be really good. I hear that there's going to be a couple folks from North Alabama that are going to be leading some of the classes. So
I've heard, yeah.
That's what I've heard. So definitely check it out, folks. Like I said, we got a really cool overtime. National President of the APWU, Mark Dimondstein, is going to be talking to us about the Israeli general strike for a ceasefire last week. Also going to be talking to Sophie Miriam about the rise of the Union Curious. Also going to be responding to billionaire Kevin O'Leary, who says that he should be able to contact his employees at literally all hours of the night, and if he can't, he should be able to fire them. That's his position. We're going to respond to it. Find out, we'll tease you. Not going to tell you what I think about it until overtime. So you got to find us on Facebook.
You got to tune in.
You got to tune in. Facebook, YouTube, The Valley Labor Report. Until next week, folks, if you're not going to find us online, see you then. All power to the workers. All right. Off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. Like I said, really cool overtime lined up for you, so don't go anywhere. We're going to take a break really quickly and be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party
Folks, welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. I have been chastised by a friend on my pronunciation of Nippon. Nippon.
Oh.
That's how you pronounce it. Nippon.
Thanks for the correction.
Yes.
We always welcome friendly corrections and feedback. We also welcome unfriendly feedback,
That's
by
right.
the way.
844-899 TVLR.
Yes, so if you're very angry, if you're one of those people who likes to troll our YouTube videos, and we see you continuing to engage, and we appreciate you.
Yes.
We like the fact that you keep watching despite how much you hate it. You clearly don't like it, and you like to tell us about it every week.
And we appreciate it.
We genuinely appreciate it. Keep it up. Keep it coming. Tell your friends who may also hate it. Tell them about it.
Mel and Joe in the Facebook chat, good morning. Joe said that he made it to the CWA picket line in Decatur for a little while this week. That's pretty cool.
All right, so that means we've covered Decatur, Athens, multiple Huntsville spots.
Yep.
Do need to make it out to Coleman. Be nice to visit down there, but love to see that. Appreciate it.
Yes, very, very good. Okay, gotcha. Oh, so Sophie's already in the Zoom? Okay, gotcha. Okay, sorry. I misunderstood what our board app was telling us. So here, so I teased this. Kevin O'Leary, Canadian billionaire, Shark Tank host, he was commenting on a new Australian law that says that employees now can ignore their bosses after hours, which really seems like kind of common sense stuff. If you're not going to be paying me to be on call. Now, obviously, it's different. If you're on call, like officially, and you're being paid to be on call, well, okay. There you go. That's fine.
That's part of the deal.
That's part of the deal. Exactly. But if you're not being paid to be on call and your supervisor, your manager, your boss can just text you or call you or email you at any time for any reason and you're supposed to respond, that's kind of bonkers. And as one Australian lawmaker said, clocking out used to mean something. Yeah. And so in Australia, they have put in place this law to make it mean something again. And so the employers now have to put in place, policies that inform workers that, and it is specific, and there are some carve-outs, like if there's an ultra emergency and they're going to be paid for it, there are carve-outs and stuff, but just, each company now in Australia has to develop a policy that informs their workers of the new law and says you do not have to respond to text messages of, regarding normal business items when you are clocked out, right? And that seems, it's just super reasonable. And so it's difficult to imagine that, somebody could have a problem with it. But there are people that have a problem with it, including Kevin O'Leary, Canadian billionaire and Shark Tank host. Unfortunately, we don't have a clip. I wish he had said this in an interview or something because the audio is always better. But he tweeted it out. He said, in Australia, employees can now ignore their bosses after hours. Let me ask you this. What happens during an emergency? Well, like I said, there are carve-outs in the law. But of course, this kind of stuff, this is exactly what I was talking about the people who run our society not being any better than us, because that's just a super normal, brain poisoned uncle thing to do. Like, this guy just read a headline and wondered and had a question, what happens during an emergency, and didn't even read, I haven't read the law. I'm not going to say I've read the law, but I have read 2 or 3 articles about it, right? And in all those articles, they mention how there are some carve-outs and there's, different things. And so he had a question, and he didn't even look beyond the headline, and he just tweeted it out as if he's the first person to have this thought. What happens during an emergency? What if the building is literally burning down, and my baby is inside of my work building, and the only person who has the key is my employee who I pay minimum wage? What am I going to do then? Well, you're the first person to ever have that thought, Kevin O'Leary, because you're so smart and important. And so you don't even because you're so smart and important, you don't even have to look and see if it's addressed anywhere in the law. You can just tweet this out because you can be assured of your smartness and importantness. And you don't even have to do any of this due diligence kind of stuff, right? And so it's just so frustrating that, these are the people that run our society. They're not any better than you, I promise you. Okay, what happens during an emergency? I don't know. Maybe you should read. This kind of policy, this is Kevin O'Leary again, this kind of policy is nonsense. If you can't be reached when the job depends on it, you're out. Who dreams up these ridiculous ideas? If someone tells me they're in silent mode, they're fired. Well, there you go. It's just amazing that people can just say this stuff. And this is another part of the entitlement, right? That these bosses and employers and the people who run our society, they have. They believe they are entitled to not only the majority of the time that we are conscious, not only that's not enough for them. They believe they're entitled to the entirety of the time that we are conscious. We should be on call without pay for these people the entirety of the time that we are conscious and unconscious. Our boss should be able to call us in the middle of the night when we are asleep trying to, be ready for work the next day so we can be productive. They should be able to call us in the middle of the night for any reason they want and get our response. I mean, just imagine the entitlement. It's really difficult to get in that kind of headspace where I believe that I am entitled to 24 hours of a person's attention without compensating them for 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just bonkers.
I used to get so upset when I would represent educators and, principals or other people in administration would send these emails after school hours and then expect them to show up the next school day, like having read the email and following whatever instructions were in the email. And it's like, listen, when I'm home, I shouldn't have to be responsible for your communication that you chose to make after work hours. Yeah. And I think the whole... The notion that it's ridiculous to think that you should have some time free from your boss, it really does speak to the entitlement to the entitlement to your time that, you should have no time that is completely separate, free. I appreciate what that politician said about, clocking out used to mean something, because as we are more connected and as our bosses can reach out to us at any time, it is something that we have to deal with. And I know other countries are dealing with this. Mm-hmm. It's something I would like to see addressed here in this country as well. And it's something that obviously a lot of unions do address in their contracts. Right. That's something that I know gets talked about at the bargaining table. And so there again, if this is an issue that you're dealing with in the workplace, all the more reason to organize and have a union.
Exactly. Yeah. And his whole, this whole thing is being driven, like I said, by entitlement. And yet his thought about the people who support this, who believe that folks who work for a living should be able to be the owners of their time after they clock out, he thinks that's entitled. Right? I mean, that's the premise behind these statements that he's making. Who dreams up these ridiculous ideas? If somebody tells me they're in silent mode, they're fired, right? As if it's too much to ask, as if the worker who says, I'm done with work when I clock out, is being entitled and asking too much and is being greedy. Yeah, I mean, it just the topsy-turviness,
Right. I mean, listen, if you are a boss and you contact your worker outside of work hours, and I say you're a worker, right? Because that's how you perceive it, like they're yours.
Right.
You contact them after work hours, they don't respond, and you fire them for that, you're garbage. You're garbage, right? I mean, you should not be held responsible if your management reaches out to you when you're off the clock, when you're off the grid, right? That's how you should be perceived. If it's a genuine emergency, that's one thing.
And then you can be paid for working that
and then you can be
genuine emergency.
paid for working that genuine emergency, and you can count that time, and it's all going to work out, right? It is what it is. Emergencies happen. But that's not really what he's talking about.
Right.
You know, he again, you know, thinks he's entitled to be able to reach out to folks any given time. And I'm sorry, and you know, even when I would just say from my personal experience, when I've had managers who were inclined to be that way, I just ignored them. Right. Like, and that's something I advised other workers to do. Like, I dare them to punish me for something I can't be held responsible for. Granted, you know, we had rights to grievances and due process rights, and not every worker enjoys those rights. So,
you got to do what you got to do to keep
you got to
your
pick your
job,
battles. You got to
and-
pick your battles and be strategic.
But that's why you should unionize. If you're in one of these workplaces where you don't have due process rights and you don't have a union contract, you don't have a grievance procedure or anything like that, and you can be like it. And you know, I mean, this is the state of affairs in the American economy. If you don't have a union if you don't have a union contract, you can be fired for not responding to after-hours work requests.
That is very true.
Which is bonkers, but that's the state of the American economy. And so, you know, you have to do what you have to do to keep your job, but while you're doing what you have to do to keep your job, you should also unionize, because you should not have to put up with this kind of entitled BS from your employer.
Right, yeah.
And
absolutely.
then after we unionize enough people and get enough political power among the organized working class, we can make it illegal.
Absolutely.
So. All right, folks. So we have our first guest in the second half of the program on the line now. Sophie Miriam is a labor policy analyst for the Colorado Fiscal Institute. They are a sister organization to Alabama Arise, right? They're also part of the EARN network.
That's
that
right. Yeah. So, you know, work with a lot of the same kind of folks, part of the same network of different nonprofits that do, you know, progressive policy work and work around worker power. So, yeah, excited for this conversation.
Yeah, Sophie, welcome to the program. Appreciate you taking the time this morning.
Thanks for having me, Jacob and Adam. Nice to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, before we dig into this, and of course, we're here talking about the Union Curious report that EPI, Economic Policy Institute, put out recently. That was sort of what prompted me to reach out. But before we get into that, I am curious, you know, you're a labor policy analyst. So tell us a little bit, what is that? Because it seems like a pretty cool job, and I'm curious what kind of drove you to that work.
It is a cool job. Thanks for asking. It's a little bit wonky to explain to folks. Basically, what I do is I work for the Colorado Fiscal Institute. We're a research and advocacy organization. We research how do we make Colorado's economy and our economy as a nation work for working class people and work for everyone. And in my specific role, I'm kind of working at the intersection of our work. We work across tax and budget, looking at how does our tax code work to serve working and middle class people in America, not just those at the top. And my work really centers around worker power and the labor movement. So kind of the intersection of economic policy and labor and unions. So a lot of my research is around different policies in Colorado that are or aren't serving Colorado people. And just looking at the data and looking at how do we form policy around both people's everyday lived experiences and what working class people need to make ends meet and take care of their families, but then also using kind of data and analysis as a tool to form better policies that can hopefully improve the lives of working people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. And, you know, I think we need all types in our movement, and that includes, no offense, the policy nerds. We love y'all, and we need y'all. We need those people on our team. So, yeah, appreciate that. Before we talk more about Union Curious and this report, you know, we did have a conversation the other day about Colorado and Alabama, and I know that got you interested to do some, you know, comparison and contrasting of our two states. Some things we have in common that maybe didn't expect. And also, I am going to brag that Alabama does have a higher union density rate than Colorado. So besides that, though, what were some of the other things that stood out to you about our two states?
Yeah, something that stood out was that, first of all, surprisingly, even though we have very different political contexts, Colorado's union density rate is sitting at 6.9%, while yours is above 7%. So I thought that was pretty impressive. I believe 7.5. So yeah, we got to catch up with Alabama on that front. But something else that stood out is, I know in previous episodes you've talked about the history of coal miners unions in Alabama, and how they've been interracial unions and really an epicenter for building worker power in the state. And it was a great episode that I listened to. And Colorado also has a history of coal miners and some rich labor history there, especially with, unfortunately, some violence in coal miners in Colorado organizing. But I think much like Alabama, we used to have much higher union density and more worker power, but as industries have shifted over time and we've switched from kind of more of an extraction economy and extracting our natural resources to new sectors, including renewable energy and the service sector and tech, we've seen these new industries arise and not necessarily seen worker power come along with it, which kind of mirrors the national trend, which they talk about kind of in this study, that union density has been on the decline, as we all know. And both Alabama and Colorado, I think, have seen that be the case, unfortunately.
Right, absolutely. And that does lead us perfectly into the report. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, what was this report? I mean, you weren't involved in terms of an author, but as a labor policy analyst, you work closely with EPI, and I know you've been following these trends in your state, but tell us a little bit, like the high level view. This report was about something they call the union curious, right? So, who are those folks, and what else would you really say, like the union curious, like what are some of the takeaways from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my high level reaction to this study is, I think it's exciting, and it shows us that there's a lot of potential for the labor movement. The authors note, quote, "Harnessing the energy of young workers is a key challenge and opportunity." I think that's the biggest high level takeaway if you hear nothing else from this. But really what they're talking about with the union curious is that generic union approval has been rising. Like, you hear this statistic that 7 in 10 Americans support unions. That's more than we see support for hot dogs. So like, we like unions more than hot dogs, but what does that really mean about like union density and actually translating to membership and then eventually contracts and hopefully people winning better economic conditions and better job quality at work, right? And boosting worker. So I think it's super interesting that they found that union approval is disconnected from union membership, first of all. And then the union curious, that is looking at the amount of people that aren't necessarily in support and aren't necessarily opposed to unions, but are curious, might be on the precipice of organizing. And what they found is that, workers have become less resistant to their unions in workplaces over time. And approval of unions in general, amongst Americans, has increased. But so these are non-union workers, the union curious. Non-union workers were asked whether they personally want to join a union at their workplace. So this is when, the political gets personal. Do you want to form a union at your place? We see a rise in uncertainty, weaker support, but a lot of the folks that previously might have been opposed to unionization, we're seeing an erosion of that opposition and a rise of those expressing, quote, uncertainty or ambivalence. And these are folks who are ripe for organizing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. So that's interesting that these people, they are a potential opportunity, right? They're right there on the edge. What do you think organizers should take away from that? What does that speak to in terms of the needs out in the field that you could take away just from that description in their study?
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things that they found in the study was looking at the breakdown of demographics. What age, what industry are the union curious concentrated in? And they found that among the non-unionized, younger workers are more supportive of unionization than those over 30. And then looking at different racial groups, we see really high levels of union support among Black workers, workers of color, and even larger age gaps in union support among white workers. So younger white workers are more likely to support or be union curious, rather, potentially support, right? And then there's a lot of union curiosity among women, and then those in retail and hospitality, which I think brings me into another point. So, I mean, those are the demographics, really young folks, workers of color, folks in the service sector. But that brings us into another point, which is that, folks in the service sector, for example, we know those are a lot of bad jobs. And one interesting thing was that they found when they focused on frontline workers, so folks in a lot of lower wage jobs, especially, that bad jobs increase the likelihood of voting for a union and reduced both uncertainty and resistance. And I won't get too into the weeds on this, but they created this cool thing called a voice gap index, where they basically asked folks whether they had like the right amount, some or no voice in their working conditions, like pay, benefits, scheduling. We know folks, for example, in the retail and service sector deal a lot with unpredictable scheduling. And that can be an issue. For example, let's say you're a mom looking for childcare and you're working at Starbucks, and it's so unpredictable when you're going to be brought in because of unpredictable scheduling. And what they found is, let's say you don't have a voice because you don't have a union. What they found is that when, the voice gap index was higher, a worker where she lacks a voice across all domains is nearly 20 percentage points more likely to support unionization and 13 percentage points less likely to oppose. So that's really interesting too. So the more problems at work also they had, and the less voice that they had, holding all these other attributes like race, gender, age fixed. If you have a lot of problems at work and you don't have a voice, aka you're probably in one of these bad jobs, you're more ripe for unionization, which I think feels obvious, but it kind of confirms that, folks in these low wage jobs that some would define as bad jobs in that way, are the most ripe to be organized and to be brought to the table in terms of this labor movement.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And something that comes to mind for me is that a lot of jobs that we would consider like, decent jobs today used to be bad jobs, right? Like auto jobs were not good jobs initially. UAW and organizing helped make those good jobs. And even in the non-union auto industry, it's still, comparatively better than a lot of other sectors, thanks to the power of unions lifting the standards, lifting the wages and benefits and the safety and working conditions. So I think, I think that speaks to like that opportunity of what if these bad jobs weren't bad anymore? And well, how do we make that happen, through worker organizing? But something else that this like union curious aspect touches on for me is like a need for education. And yes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I think that point you just made is so true in both of our states. Again, like I didn't know how much Alabama and Colorado had in common, but much like you guys, we have this rising renewable energy sector. We're an oil and gas state, and those jobs have historically been unionized, like our coal miners in these extractive industries. But then we're seeing solar jobs. We hear they're not good jobs. How do we make them good jobs? Probably unions, probably setting the bar higher for all workers. And I mean, on that subject of education, I think another finding here is that there's this rise of the union curious, and these are folks who are ambivalent, but they just don't really know much. A lot of the uncertainty, likely, I think, from what you see here in the results of the study, is that folks don't really know a ton about what unions can do for them. On the subject of, for example, job security, training, and workplace safety, large proportions of workers said that they didn't think that unionization would have any effect on those factors of their job. It wouldn't help with their job security or safety. When in fact, we know that in right-to-work states, which I know Alabama is one and Colorado is kind of a modified right-to-work state, right-to-work states where union density is lower, we see more workplace fatalities, roughly a 14% increase in occupational fatalities. I think that speaks for itself, right? Unions help boost job quality in so many ways, but we need to kind of get out there and educate on how, having a voice and having a union to help negotiate contracts can help along many lines and help make those bad jobs good jobs. And a lot of folks, another example is, don't think unionization would have any effect on workplace relationships, including their relationships with their coworkers. which the authors say, quote, suggests that there's a large population with a limited understanding of what unions require and what they can deliver, right? It's all about raising our collective voice together. So I think that's a really important lesson here for union organizers, is getting out and educating on, okay, we know that unions can boost wages like over 10% for workers across an industry, not just union workers, but they're shown to boost wages by 10% for workers in the same industry for union workers, but then private sector workers, across the sector, regardless of whether they're in a union. So I think raising the bar for everyone is important there. And then all of those benefits like retirement plans, workplace grievance, predictable scheduling, all these pieces that could go into a contract beyond just wages and benefits, and the benefits of bringing you together with your with your comrades, I think is really an important piece of it that we have to go out and educate on.
Yeah, I think that is something that hits hard for me, is that a lot of people are not used to collective action. A lot of people are not used to, coming together and organizing collectively necessarily. I think less so now than they used to be. We've seen the decline of like social institutions over decades, whether it's churches or bowling leagues or, sewing circles, whatever you want to look at. People tend to gather less than they used to. We are a very individualized society, and individualized consumption seems to be kind of the name of the game in our country. And so I think that's really interesting to me, the fact that folks are curious about the unions, but they don't necessarily connect the dots yet on how it can change relationships. And when I've talked to folks who have organized and been part of new organizing drives, including, my own new organizing drive, one of the things that stands out the most is the relationships and how much closer it brought me to my coworkers, and how we got to know each other better, how we had each other's back, we strategized together, and it brought a feeling of solidarity and power that you actually do have to feel. You have to experience it to really, understand it and get it. And so I think it's one of those things that folks don't have a lot of practice doing it. And so that is definitely a struggle. And I do really think there's a lot of promise, though, the fact that there is such a support among young folks and among people of color. And, something else that, you and I talked about the other day is there are a lot of folks who are younger, who are engaged in social justice movements, who are active politically, or, they're active when it comes to the environment, or when it comes to racial justice, other issues that are important to them. And I think that's also something that our labor movement has to do, is show the connection that human rights are human rights, and that includes labor rights. And labor movement has always fought for human rights. I mean, we have an imperfect history there, to be sure. But generally speaking, right, if you look at the women's movement, the civil rights movement, any great movement for liberation in this country, labor has played a big part. And so I think helping folks connect those dots is really important as well.
100%. Yeah, I think the decline we're coming up on election season, and it's concerning that, we've seen this decline in civic participation and collective action, because that also, comes into play when we ask folks to vote. And another benefit of unions that I'd mention is that, across the lines of civic participation, looking at, voting outcomes, we know that voting increases, or rather unionization increases folks' odds of voting in election and being civically engaged. The statistics around that are pretty staggering. I'll pull a few up for us here, but I think it's really interesting that, states that have more union density are more likely to have ballot boxes, which make voting more accessible. That's so staggering, and they really help folks come together and increase their propensity to engage with others, with their coworkers on a personal level, on a human level, to engage with their democracy on a political level, across environmental, racial, social justice, across issues. So I think that's a really important point, and really exciting for organizers hoping to get out there, engage young people who might be already engaged in some of those other issues, and seeing unions kind of as democracy for our economy.
If I could go back to something that you mentioned earlier, you said that it seemed like there was a lack of kind of understanding about what unions are, what unions can do, related to how it might change relationships with your employer or with your coworkers. And I totally agree with that. I really do see in the public a significant lack of understanding of just the basic fundamentals of, even questions as simple as what is a union? Like what do you mean when you say a union? And I, like you said, I think that if we could if more people knew exactly what unions were and what they could do and how kind of participatory they are, I think that we would be able to translate those union curious into people who are actively participating in union campaigns. But how do we do that? Was there anything in the report or in any of your work that showed some case studies for for good communication campaigns and press strategies, or just anything that some unions in some areas have been able to do to increase awareness of what unions are and what we do?
That's a great question. I think that's the next step with this study. I mean, I think something they called to in this report was definitely educating on the benefits of unions and the basics of what they are, because those statistics on the percent that didn't think that unions could have any impact on things like, for example, job security and safety,
right,
like that.
That's like what we do.
Yeah, it's like what? So I mean, I think, I think one thing is, like, I think this should be something that people learn in civics in schools. And that's just me personally. That's not based on any data. But that's just one policy idea here. I think just getting out there and doing the education, I think it's really difficult, but looking at how we do that at a systemic level and help folks really understand, and whether that's through social media and online, and people need kind of a crash course in Unions 101. And I think also it's inoculating against all the barriers. That's another piece that we're talking about here in Colorado, and I know is an issue in Alabama. Like, you guys are a right to work state too, and have, other barriers, like we don't have necessarily card check neutrality or other policies that, help organizers get on the ground in shops and organize folks. So essentially, and then we have millions of dollars spent in union busting by corporations that know that if we band together, we'll actually ensure our economy works for working class people and not just those at the very top. So they're so scared, right, that employers spend over $400 million per year on union avoidance to prevent working people from winning a voice, right? We know that's going on. So I think it's also inoculating folks against that, because we know that there are a lot of barriers on the table. And while we're seeing this energy, especially in sectors where a lot of young people are employed, you hear about Starbucks, you hear about Trader Joe's, you hear about this exciting stuff in new sectors, but then is that translating to contracts and progress? Well, it's slow, because our labor laws are so outdated and create such large barriers to really standing up for working people. And the cards are stacked definitely on the side of large corporations and employers who want a union bust. So I think, I don't know the answers, but maybe it's getting out, talk to young people in schools. Maybe it's getting out and just, setting a clear expectation around, like, where our policies are at right now, and starting to shift some of those barriers that get in the way of organizing. I think all that could help move us. But I mean, definitely, you guys are asking the right questions.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's going to be like an all of the above approach is the only thing that's going to work. Like, whatever the other side is doing, we at least need to do some of that, right? They are integrating church power, so we need to do that. They're running billboards and ads on TV and radio, right? So we need to do some of that. But they also prop up entire, media ecosystems. In Alabama, not only did you have the traditional media running op-eds and advertisements of the anti-UAW campaign, but you also have, institutions like Yellowhammer News, 1819 News, multiple right-wing radio stations across the state employing full-time host, right? And so you have a massive amount of propaganda, to your point, about the $400 million spent in union busting alone, right? That's just strictly the union busting. That doesn't even get into the massive amount of propaganda that is adjacent to this, that is pumped into the airwaves every single day or on people's screens every single day, right? And if they are already coming at this with a lack of foundational knowledge, they're not quite sure what a union is, not quite sure what they do or why they're relevant or how they work, right? And then they're bombarded with these anti-messages. It does make our work a lot harder, but it speaks to the necessity of it, right? Of really educating folks and building relationships with folks to help educate them, because I think that's part of it, right? I mean, we could run, if some mysterious billionaire decided to give unions unlimited funds to run unlimited TV ads all the time, 24/7, that wouldn't be enough, right? Like, it just would not be enough. I think it is going to involve real relationships and, community coalition building. But those are just some of my thoughts. And I really appreciate this report, like getting folks thinking. And that's what I hope, organizers will take a look at it and see some of the opportunities that we have out there and some of the, some of the potential we have, but also some of the issues that we're dealing with, because 10% density in this country is just not acceptable. We are too weak. That's why our labor laws suck like they do and are as broken as they are. It's why, inequality is at a historic level. Our unions have been on the decline for 50 years, and so has the working class, and we've really been getting our butt kicked. And, that has to change, and that has to mean, to Hamilton Nolan's point earlier this week in his piece, we need to do 10 times whatever we're doing right now. Right. And before we start doing that, we need to make sure, is what we're doing right now even doing anything at all? Is it even working? Right.
Yeah. Your point about the ads, I think you reminded me when you mentioned churches, like something we're doing right now with the AFL in Colorado was organizing labor and faith spaces and creating the opportunities for folks to go into congregations and just talk about the intersections between the labor movement and what we're trying to do here, and how we think about faith and how we come together in those spaces. And I think our opposition here has kind of monopolized media and some of those spaces, but the facts are on the side of unions, right? We know that unions boost wages. We know they boost civic participation. We know they're good for working class people, and they can bring people together across the lines of race and upbringing and background, right? Because we're fighting for our everyday economic conditions, for things that matter for all of us, to take care of our families. But I think your points are totally right. It's an all of the above approach, and we have to start thinking creatively about how we get out there with the messaging here. Because you hear all of this union busting stuff, and it's just like, most of it is just not true, and it's really misleading. So we got to get out there with the truth about, the real benefits of unions.
That's right. I mean, the truth is unions are good for this country, and it's our job to make sure that this country knows that the working people of this country realize the power that we have when we come together and unite around our common interests. We can do amazing things when we do that, and it can transcend those differences. So, what were you going to say, Jacob?
Yeah, well, I was just going to put, just kind of stomp my foot on the point that you made about, the people that are employed doing this kind of right-wing culture and economic propaganda for, business owners and stuff. I mean, there are 3 full-time radio hosts that are just conservative news radio guys, full-time employed to do that, just in Huntsville, which only has a metro population of 500,000. I mean, that's and that doesn't count. Each of them has like 2 producers, and then behind them, there's this whole team of like salespeople who sell ads and sponsorships and everything like this. And that's just
Huntsville. It's crazy how many of these people there are pushing this poison onto people just on the radio. And then we're not even talking about the Russians who are putting this stuff on YouTube, paying people $100,000 for a video that gets 700 views. I mean, it's, astounding the amount of money that's out there. It's just wild. So, unless there was anything else that you wanted to make sure you asked, I wanted to, as we were rounding out our conversation with you as, the labor policy analyst for the Colorado Fiscal Institute, what kind of stuff are we going to be getting? What kind of stuff are you going to be making them pass in Colorado in the next legislative session? I'm sure that all of the legislators over there are, super scared of big labor and everything, and Sophie Miriam particularly. So what's on the docket for the next legislative session?
Yeah, unfortunately, the last session, even with a Democratic trifecta, I think we see barriers to getting Democrats on board with bills that would help support unions and labor. So we had some bills to, help ensure that schools, when they're updating their HVAC systems in Colorado, and I'm sure this is probably an issue in Alabama too, they need to update those energy efficiency systems. It helps our climate goals. It helps make sure that schools are healthy for kids and creates good union jobs if you take high road contractors. But that bill, for example, got vetoed. We had a bill around wage theft. We had a bill around preventing captive audience meetings, talking about union busting. That bill got busted. So I think we're coming back this year in Colorado, hoping to really pass some policies. I can't speak to too many specifics yet. That policies that'll help take down those barriers to building union density and barriers to organizing. And I think hoping that other states will, look at policies like right to work, look at policies like card check neutrality, look at how do we start to take down barriers to organizing industries where we know the lowest wage, most disadvantaged workers are located, and helping uplift those folks first. And I think that starts with really looking at our labor laws. And we'll see what comes down the pike here. And I'm sure that it won't be too off base from what's going on in Alabama either.
Yeah, well, you don't have to convince us that there are Democrats that are not going to be super supportive of union priorities.
We've met a few of those.
We've met a few of those. There's one in the Mercedes campaign, a Democrat city councilor, preacher, who Mercedes had literally walking the shop floor telling people to vote no against the union campaign. I mean, just really kind of astounding stuff. And then, of course, you had the whole array of them.
Is he the one that said that Dr. King would not have supported unions today?
Yeah.
That his support of unions in the past was not indicative of any current struggles.
It was something.
Do not be confused.
Yeah, it was something like that. Just really weird. We'd have to go back and play the clip, but it was super bizarre. And then the whole array of the people like not saying anything or being wishy-washy or voting in favor of loosening child labor laws. I mean, you may have actually heard about this. There was a Democrat who won a state house race in Alabama, kind of unexpectedly and in a blowout very soon after that IVF stuff came down from the Supreme Court. She won by like 20 or 30 points. Like her second vote in the state house was in favor of loosening child labor laws. After she had told us on this radio show she would not support that. Anyway, I'm not mad about it at all. It's
those
crazy.
Rollbacks on child labor laws are crazy. Colorado is actually one of the few states that that's something we won on this year, is we were able to pass a bill that strengthened protections against child labor laws. Because, that's a national issue, is we're seeing a rise in child labor. And that's another issue I've worked on. And unfortunately, in a lot of red states, you're seeing this concerted rollback by right-wing groups to roll back these child labor laws to provide companies with cheap labor. You're seeing kids, especially migrant children, working with things like bone saws in like meat packing facilities. And a lot of the issue there is these fissured workplaces, aka like they're contracting with someone else and the blame can be shifted. But in no way in any world should we have rollbacks that make policies less protective of kids.
Right.
And those kids need to also have access to school and an education and a future. And it's not an either or. That's a discussion that we had in Colorado. As long as the kids are safe, we have laws to ensure that kids can get work experience, but some of these rollbacks are so regressive and so scary. It's very, you want to go back to the Gilded Age? You want to go back to 10-year-olds in factories? It's wild.
Well, the answer to that from some people is yes, actually. It's, I don't know. It's bonkers. But Sophie Miriam, labor policy analyst, Colorado Fiscal Institute, sister organization to Alabama Arise, friend of the show, part of the EARN Network. Really appreciate your time and look forward to having you back on the show sometime.
Thanks, guys. Awesome. Have a great Saturday.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. So we got a couple of other international stories, although the phone number is 844-899-8857 if anybody wants to call in, 844-899-TVLR. We will take your calls. You can also leave us a voicemail if you're listening to this as a podcast. You can leave us a voicemail and we might respond to it on the next program. So we have a couple of international stories that I haven't dug just too deep into, but I can give you a really quick overview. Over in Argentina, you've been having this this consistent push by the Milei administration to privatize a lot of government-owned enterprises, and one of those government-owned enterprises is an airline that the government claims is losing money. Although, of course, I can't verify any of that kind. Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of stuff that they're going to say. So I can't verify that, but that's what they say. And they are in contract negotiations. Inflation continues to be a really big problem in Argentina, and the pilots union says that not only are they below, the industry standard, particularly international, but even nationally, they say that they are below what similar situated workers make in the private sector. They say that as of right now, they are 70% below inflation. So they are making, when adjusted to inflation, 70% less than they were like a year ago. And so that's, not great, right? And so they're asking for a 70% raise which sounds like a lot when you say it in the American context, but if inflation has increased that much and you're making 70% less, a 70% raise only gets you parity to where you were before, which again, the airline unions are saying was less than the private sector in Argentina was making already, right? So in response to that, the Argentinian government said, we'll give you an 11% raise, which was obviously not satisfactory. And so the pilots and navigators went on a 9-hour strike yesterday, Friday, September the 6th. There were some 150 flights that were canceled and some 15,000 flyers, customers, were not able to get on their flights because of this strike. I could not find how many pilots and navigators the unions represented, but that was the effect that it had on the airports and the customers. And so of course the government is coming out and saying, oh, this is it's extortion. Actually, is what the government is saying, is one of the things that they're saying. They're also claiming, contra the union, that the pilots make more than their private sector counterparts, which is kind of difficult to believe if it's kind of, but I don't live in Argentina, right? I can't. So I'm giving you both sides and being fair and balanced here. Just letting you know what each side is saying and telling you who I would be more likely to believe. I would be more likely to believe the workers. So they struck over both the plans to try to privatize this company generally and also the really kind of rather insulting pay raise offer that the company gave. 11% when you're looking at 70% inflation from the last raise is, that's insulting. So that's kind of where we are with that. Some of the latest on Argentina. There continues to be labor strife in Argentina, even as, and it's funny that
this is happening because just in the last week, I've seen a bunch of people really salivating over the Milei administration, talking about how great it's been economically and how inflation is coming down and all of this kind of stuff from right-wing types and Elon Musk and people like this. And the workers apparently do not agree when they're willing to go out on strike over some of these policies. And so it's just really frustrating to see those kinds of arguments deployed in favor of the Milei administration. Inflation is decreasing, but if inflation decreases, prices are still going up, right? Inflation decreases when inflation goes from 70% to 60%, but that means that your prices are still 60% higher than they were a year ago or from whenever the inflation measurement was taken. And but it is still true that inflation is decreasing. And it's funny that the exact same type of people who relay these arguments on behalf of Milei pan these arguments when they are put forward on behalf of the Biden administration. When, people like Democrats and those types talk about how inflation is decreasing in the United States, which is true objectively, as far as I can tell, is true in Argentina. But when people say that about America, even though America's inflation is so much less than Argentina, and we are unironically getting close to a normal level of inflation, 2.9% is still higher than the 2% target, but it's not that much higher. And so if we can maintain a 2 to 3% inflation rate, that's not bad. You still have the effects from the previous really high 8, 9, 10% inflation. But if we can get people's wages higher, we can kind of compensate for that. But it's funny when people accept arguments and when they don't, and how they deploy nuance in some situations and how they don't in others. So, obviously all solidarity with the pilots that are on strike in Argentina, or that went on strike. They're back at work now. And they said that if the government continues to take this kind of negotiating position, that they're not going to be offering raises that match the inflation, then they will continue going on strikes, and they will go on more and more lengthy strikes. So we'll continue to keep an eye on Argentina. If you have any guests from Argentina, that you would recommend us reach out to, or that you would recommend reach out to us, please go ahead and, make those connections for us. Obviously, we do not have very many connections with Argentina, but would love to have some folks, especially if they can speak English, and they're affiliated with the labor movement in Argentina. Would love to have them on the show sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, any international connections that you have, if you're able to connect us to somebody who is a union folk somewhere else, we're always down to talk to them. Mm-hmm. We have talked to some interesting people from across the world already, and love to do that. So yeah, definitely hit us up. I know we do have listeners in Canada. We have listeners who've reached out to us from Europe, which is really cool. And we've had the chance to interview folks from Asia and from Africa as well, and Latin America as well. So yeah, always down for some international guests, because ultimately, worker struggles are united and connected. And we need workers to organize everywhere, right? What we were talking about earlier with Sophie, that, we need to grow our union density in Alabama and the South and the United States. We need to grow it everywhere, because there is a global race to the bottom. Corporations are going anywhere they can. They're looking for any opportunity they can to save money at the expense of workers. And so the more workers organize in every country, the better off we will all be.
Exactly. We're going to be having Mark Dimondstein, president of the American Postal Workers Union, on here in just a moment. We do have one more really quick international story. Oh, he just jumped on. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and jump right into that. Mark Dimondstein is the national president of the American Postal Workers Union, the largest union of the United States Postal Service, of which there are 4, fun fact. Some people don't know that. Some people do not realize there are 4 unions representing workers at the Postal Service. But now you do. You know there are 4 unions, one of which is the APWU, the largest one. President Dimondstein, welcome back to the program. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Well, I appreciate coming on, and thanks so much. Just one quick correction, though. the Letter Carriers Union, the National Association of Letter Carriers Union, is now actually the largest of the four, but we're almost there and we work together well. So I just want to be clear for your listeners.
For sure. No, I appreciate the correction. Always open to those kinds of. Were you the largest for an amount of time? Seems like I'd heard that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had been, but a lot of changes in the automation and technology and other things have caused us to decline some, but we're still big and we're still strong.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, your union recently, I believe it was in August, began negotiations with the Postal Service for a new contract. And actually, at least three, maybe when you answer this, you can also tell us if the National Postal Mail Handlers Union are in negotiations as well. But the National Association of Letter Carriers are in negotiations. They represent city letter carriers. The National Association of Rural Letter Carriers are either in negotiations or they're about to begin negotiations. And the APWU, like I just said, you are in negotiations with the United States Postal Service right now. Could you give us a little bit of a look behind the curtain, to the extent that you can, as to where negotiations stand at this point? What are some of the highlights from where management is, what their proposals are, and the unions so far?
Well, Jacob, it's kind of early to figure it all out, so to speak, and we have communicated with our members as well. Obviously, we started negotiations in opening day in late June. Our contract expires September 20th. So a lot of what happens in those few months is a lot of exchange of proposals, a lot of discussion. But usually there's not a lot of actual action until we get closer to the cutoff. So we are engaged in an intense couple weeks right now. In fact, we go into what we call lockdown on September 14th on the last week. And we're going to do everything in our power to reach an agreement. Our last round of bargaining, our contract also expired in September, and we didn't reach an agreement till early December. So sometimes it takes a little more time. But in terms of broad stroke, like any other workers, we want postal workers who pour their lifeblood into this public mission to be rewarded for their dedication. Like many of the other unions, we're dealing with a multiple tiered workforce, which is very divisive, lowers morale, and it's unfair. And so we've made some progress in the past bridging those gaps, but we're working on that now. We have a whole non-career section of our workforce with less pay, less benefits, less rights. We're fighting for an all-career workforce. These are some of the other things that your listeners have seen other unions fighting for over the last decade. I may point out that this, in terms of a new contract bargaining, this is the largest bargaining unit in the country this year. So it's not only important for the 200,000 workers that we represent, all their families. It's really important for all workers, because the standards any union can set, if they're good, strong, and moving in the right direction, helps uplift all workers. And if I can mention one other thing, because you have a lot of good listeners out here, we also bargain for the public good. What we mean by that is part of our bargaining and part of our proposals is to improve the service. It's not where it should be for the people of the country. It's not the fault of the hardworking postal workers. It's the fault of management. And we have proposals about broadening service, about expanding service, and about improving service. And if we don't reach a contract on September 20th, and whether we reach a contract or not, I just want to share with you on October 1st, where the American Postal Workers Union is sponsoring a national day of action focused on fixing the poor service, but also, if we don't have a contract yet, rallying with the public for a good contract. Because in our contract, for instance, we're fighting for better staffing. Better staffing translates into good service. So the public has a real stake, as well as we do in the public, of us achieving a really good contract, and one that unites with the people of the country around the kind of service that they deserve. So if you want to join us for the rally, you can go to apwu.org/rally, and we have a map all over the country. We have at least 120 events as of now, and we expect that will grow.
The local president here with 359, Shelton Thomas, actually texted me just yesterday, notified me of that.
Right.
As soon as he gets the location and everything done, I do plan to send it out to our local affiliates with the Labor Council and get you a big rally out here in Huntsville at the very least. So we'll be doing what we can to support. I did notice at your national convention that the APWU passed an endorsement or a resolution endorsing Sean Fain's call to align contract expirations with May 1st, 2028. Labor councils across the country have been passing resolutions like that. There are some other national unions that have. Our labor council in North Alabama, I believe, was the first labor council to do so. And so it was very exciting to see APWU endorse that call. Is that going to be a big priority in those negotiations that you have right now?
Jacob, our negotiating committee has not had a lot of discussion yet about that issue. The length of the contract usually comes in towards the end. And of course, like all our bargaining, it takes two to tango. So whatever we're striving for, we have to get some kind of agreement from management. But it's a good call that Brother Fain made, trying to unite the working class, exercise our power together. Whether the APW and our process fits into that, whether management would agree, we'll have to see. But I think that was a positive discussion and resolution at our convention. And the labor movement needs to think much broader, more militant, and more united.
Exactly. I agree. I appreciate that and that leadership from the postal workers. So, we spoke to you about 6 months ago now, in part about the positioning of the American labor movement on what's happening in Israel. And we spoke not long after the formation of the National Labor Network for Ceasefire, and it was also not long after the AFL-CIO Executive Board unanimously endorsed a ceasefire. I imagine, I understand that those conversations were pretty tricky and some tense conversations, I think. Since then, we know that the destruction has continued in Gaza, and the Labor Network for Ceasefire has sought to increase pressure on the U.S. administration to leverage power against Israel to try to put an end to the war. And so before we talk about some of the specific recent developments in Israel, can you talk to us generally about why you think it was important to stand up an organization specifically within the labor movement specifically devoted to pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza? Why was it important to create the National Labor Network for Ceasefire?
Well, that's a very good question. And look, the question of war and peace is a working class issue. Here we are, workers paying taxes. The billionaire class generally doesn't. The Jeff Bezos of the world don't. The huge corporations generally don't, but workers do. And how our taxes are used should be very important and is very important to the workers. So here we have a situation. Look, it's a historically complex situation. The National Labor Network isn't going to resolve the entire crises and challenges of the Middle East. But we can fight to resolve, because unions always should be on the side of social justice, not just justice in our workplace, but we live in communities, we live in a country, and we live in the world. And our members are really horrified at what's going on. And it's particularly important for the U.S. labor movement to weigh in, because our government and this administration is feeding this war. And any objective observer, I think, draws the honest conclusion that's what Israel's response to the Hamas October 7th actions, which every union and the National Labor Network has condemned. But Israel's response has been barbaric and horrific, targeting men, women, innocent men, women, and children, particularly children, targeting food, targeting water supplies, targeting the healthcare system, targeting housing. 85% of the housing is destroyed. Targeting journalists, over 140 journalists, so the word can't get out, have been targeted. We can't sit here, if we believe in any kind of justice, and let that happen. In addition, this has a real danger of leading to a wider war, and it looks like if if things go the wrong way, and they are going the wrong way, that this could easily become a regional war or maybe a world war. Who's asked to fight these wars? Who's asked to kill and be killed if it's not the workers of the world? So simply speaking, the labor movement needs to speak out, because we, at least as a minimum, need to answer the cries of humanity. Stop the killing, stop the bombing, stop the targeting of food and water and medical hospitals and so on. So our demands are quite simple, right? Release of all hostages on all sides, an immediate ceasefire, long overdue. When our union first made a statement on November 8th, I think in the statement it said 10,000 civilians have been killed. Now it's closer to 50,000, and that may be a low figure. Immediate ceasefire and massive humanitarian aid. And since those original demands, and by the way, there's 8 national unions that make up the National Labor Network, but there's over 200 other union organizations and thousands of individuals that have signed on. And even those unions who are not officially part of the National Labor Network, generally speaking, now have some level of resolution or statements calling for a ceasefire. That's the minimum we can do. If we stand for solidarity, and the labor movement does and should, then that solidarity needs to extend to the innocent people of Gaza, an open door prison with people with no place to go, being starved out. And of course, the workers of Gaza and the trade unions of Gaza and Palestine as well. So we're proud to be part of this. And by the way, our members overwhelmingly support this position. It came up at our recent national convention in July, and the convention overwhelmingly stood by and reiterated the leadership position of calling for a ceasefire. And we also had a separate resolution that was debated out that passed, calling for an end to military aid at least until there's a ceasefire. When I say an end to military aid, I'm talking about US military aid. Every one of these bombs, I shouldn't say everyone, but most of these bombs have the USA printed on them. And workers should not stand for that. We need our tax dollars to go for justice anywhere, and certainly justice at home. We want those tax dollars used for education, for healthcare, for a clean environment, and so on. So it is a working class issue, and we're on the side of the people of this country, overwhelmingly, and the people of the world. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's stop the humanitarian crisis. Let's get food, water, and supplies into Gaza. And then from there, hopefully we'll be able to play a role in trying to figure out the best path forward. But let's at least stop the slaughter.
Yes, and it is very frustrating, when you see even supposed advocates and allies of the labor movement kind of chastise us for taking a position on war and peace, which, as you rightly pointed out, it's really difficult to imagine a more working class issue than war, than whether working people are going to be killed by other conscripted working people. It's just how can you get more working class issue than that? And yet, people like Orrin Cass, who kind of purport to be pro-union and pro-labor, tell us to shut up and dribble, that kind of thing. And it's just very frustrating to see that. And I hope that others kind of see through the charade of these types who pretend on the one hand to support us, and then on the other hand, anytime we kind of step out of line, they try to, whip us back into line. And you mentioned that, the APWU called for, cease to military aid for Israel, at least until a ceasefire. And that call was echoed by the National Labor Network for ceasefire a couple of months ago. And so can you explain why was that an important step for your union and the labor network to take
even as, because I imagine that there are some people who say, look, you've called for a ceasefire. The administration knows your position. Why do you keep bringing this kind of stuff up? Why do you want to add pressure to, they already know how you feel. Why was it important to take this next step?
Well, obviously, whatever limited pressure we brought to bear and others hasn't been enough. And we believe, and we're not alone, that the United States government and this administration has absolute leverage through the purse and through armaments to stop this slaughter. And so that letter was an attack. It's really in line with our initial demand for a ceasefire. Here we are 11 months later. Now what we've said is that to get a ceasefire, obviously, since nothing else has worked, obviously the leverage and the pressure has to be increased. And that PowerPoint is the question of the military funding. Israel gets over $4 billion a year, the state of Israel, over $4 billion a year in normal times, so-called normal times, from our tax dollars. And that's basically military aid. And as soon as October 7th took place, the Biden administration upped, I think, another 14 or 15, 16 billion immediately. And that's being used to slaughter innocent children. And so that ceasefire, people can talk about ceasefire all day long. The politicians can talk about ceasefire all day long. They have the power with the purse strings to force that ceasefire. And so that letter was a recognition that the pressure thus far and the calls for a ceasefire have not been enough. And we have to up that demand. And it's absolutely within the power of this administration and this government to withhold the military funding and other pressure points that they could certainly use. And so that becomes the only path we know of, or one of the main paths to force this administration to get more serious about a ceasefire. We believe if this administration in the White House and in this Congress wants a ceasefire, they got the power to get it done. And they need to go out and get it done.
The American labor movement is not the only party trying to increase pressure for a ceasefire. The Israeli labor movement is, and this was very shocking to me, actually. But tensions seem to be increasing in Israeli society, and the Israeli Labor Federation, the Histadrut, I think that's how you pronounce it. They called for a general strike last Monday. They conducted a general strike last Monday. It was short-lived. The courts put an end to it on the same day. But the willingness of hundreds of thousands in Israel to strike over the posture of the government seems to show that patience is running thin with the government's position. Even still, the reason for the discontent among the Israeli population is kind of is kind of complicated, or maybe you would say it's not complicated because it's really not, wrapped up in the suffering of the Palestinians. It's primarily wrapped up in right concern about the Israeli hostages and trying to get them home. But it seems like there's a recognition or a bubbling recognition that the interest that the Israeli public has with bringing the hostages home is at odds with the government's position of continuing to prosecute the war in Gaza, or whatever you want to call it. Can you expand on some of those dynamics and what the strike means?
Well, Jacob, I can try. I think you summed it up pretty well. Some of the motivations might be a little different than others, but the fact of the matter is, with hundreds of thousands of unionized workers who probably have recognized for a long time that Netanyahu is no friend of the workers of Israel, and certainly not friend of the workers of the Palestinian communities, that he's also an enemy of the safety of the hostages, because part of any ceasefire deal includes release of hostages. And it's come out in the press just the other day or two, in the Israeli press. They actually have a document where some of those hostages who were recently killed were part of a planned release by name. And so the Israeli population, or a large segment of it, is drawing the conclusion that Netanyahu and his absolute warmongering, what appears to be a goal of eliminating the Palestinian people from the face of the earth, right? That goal runs counter to the safety of the hostages and really in some ways the safety of the Israeli workers as well. So I think it's a positive thing. I haven't studied it deeply, but I thought it was a positive thing because however people arrive at the need for a ceasefire, that's our main call. And when you make that call, people come at it from many different angles, but that's the call that we need. And I believe in the Israeli trade union action, strike and actions. They were also calling for humanitarian aid as part of that. So however people get there, once we're there, we can certainly unite, even if we're coming at it from different vantage points and different priorities.
You know, the importance of coming together, even if we are arriving at it from different perspectives. I think being able to kind of in unity call for a ceasefire is important, and it kind of reminds me of some of the first iterations of interracial unionism in this country, reading some of the testimonies from, I'm thinking specifically of packing house workers, I think in Ohio and Cleveland, and you can read some of the testimonies of the black workers, how they didn't trust the white workers, when they initially tried to, amalgamate the black and white unions, but they recognized that we have to be in coalition with the white workers. Otherwise, we're going to be made to scab on them, or they're going to be made to scab on us. And then much the same with the white workers. The white workers were talking about, I'm better than, obviously I'm better than a black worker. This would be a white worker talking, working in a packing house. But if I allow them to be used to scab on me, then that's not good for me. And so there was a, kind of coming together from very different perspectives. But then within a decade or so, those black and white workers were marching together for integration. And so, I think that was a really powerful story of how just being together can actually foster some sort of fellow feeling and cooperation and a sense of solidarity, and start to erode at these long held prejudices. And obviously the dynamics are different and all of that, but you would hope that you could start to see some of that kind of stuff in Israel. Adam, I saw you taking a note. I don't know, was there anything else that you wanted to ask Brother Dimondstein before we let him go?
Oh, I just wanted to thank you for your leadership.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to share with everybody, if you want to go to the National Labor Network website, just Google National Labor Network for ceasefire. There's a statement that individuals can sign, that local unions and central labor bodies can, and there's a fair amount of information on there. We obviously can't let down our guard. We have to keep the pressure on. That's what humanity demands, and that's what international working class solidarity demands. So we encourage all of you to check out the National Labor Network, join in. We had, for instance, a really interesting, inspiring, in some ways chilling, because we were getting reports from Gaza about what's happening to the people there. We had a webinar that I think about 1,000 people got on. It's on the National Labor Network, and it was a webinar with Palestinian trade unionists. And so that's a voice that we need to amplify, and union people need to, and working people need to hear from. So that's some of the work that we've been doing as well. And we encourage you to go on our website.
Yes, and I did. I've listened to a few or at least one of the webinars that you had with some Palestinian trade unionists, and it was great to hear from them, and obviously, harrowing and those sorts of things. And appreciate all the work that you're doing, both for American postal workers and in the name of international solidarity.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. That I really appreciate the leadership you've demonstrated, being willing to speak out in the name of solidarity, because I can imagine that there are other folks in similar high-ranking positions who find it easier not to. And I do appreciate that, and I think it does make a difference. It empowers other unionists to be able to speak up and bring these conversations to our meetings and to our workplaces. It really does make a difference, and so I appreciate the leadership that you and the APWU have shown for this movement.
Well, we appreciate it, and look, I think it's the least we can do. I wish we could do more. But I believe that people that get elected to positions like mine have a responsibility to lead, to educate, to lead, to mobilize, and to do the right thing. I probably butchered a quote, but I think it was Martin Luther King that talked about at one point, I think it was in relation to the Vietnam War, that the character of a person is not so much what they do in times of convenience, but what they do in times of inconvenience. And so we do have a special responsibility as the U.S. labor movement and U.S. workers, since it's our government that's funding this slaughter, to speak up, to continue to press, and to make a fundamental, needed, even if it's a basic change of saving lives and stopping this war.
Mark Dimondstein, President of the American Postal Workers Union, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to come on, and solidarity to all your good listeners out there.
All right.
Thanks, solidarity, brother.
That's going to wrap it up for us today, I think. We're a little bit ahead of when we would normally cut, but that's fine. Sometimes we go a little bit over, so we can cut a little bit ahead unless there was something that you wanted to make sure we got to, Adam.
Just want to remind folks about the Alabama Troublemaker School, October 19th. Again, labornotes.org/events. If you can't make it to the Alabama Troublemaker School, you should still go to labornotes.org/events and find out what online trainings are happening. Lots of good online workshops. I do want to thank all the folks who attended my listening session this week with Alabama Rise. Had a good meeting at the Huntsville Unitarian Church. Had some good conversation talking about the issues affecting working people here in the state. So really appreciated that, as well as our Labor in the Pulpit events this past weekend at the Huntsville Unitarian Church, as well as working with a group out of the Episcopal Church of the Nativity in Huntsville. Was excited to hear, in Sophie's interview earlier, she mentioned some of the faith and labor work they're doing in Colorado. So I'm excited to hear more about that and learn more about that. I think it is something that is really essential for us to do, especially here in the South. So, that was a really positive development. What else do we have on the docket? I do want to mention that Alabama Rise has their annual meeting on September 28th. And so that is where the members actually choose the annual legislative priorities. The members vote on the agenda. And this year will be a little different. There were not any new issue proposals per se. So nothing is getting knocked off the agenda. There were just different strategies and approaches and specific kind of subtopics. So that's what you will be voting on, so to speak, if you are a member, and you can join with a donation of any amount, or you can join for free. Just hit me up. Again, that's Alabama Rise, the statewide coalition fighting for poor and working folks, fighting for better state policies in Montgomery. And as we mentioned earlier with the interview with Sophie, there's a whole network of these groups. The Economic Policy Institute has a network called EARN. So check it out. If you are in Kentucky or Louisiana or any other state, there's probably an affiliate in your state. And something that I'm really passionate about is getting these kind of progressive policy type shops, nonprofits, and labor working together more closely, right? Because the folks who are doing, the good work in the State House, doing that lobbying, doing that policy and research work, we need them working hand in hand with our labor movement. And often, at least in some states, the state labor federation is not particularly strong politically, right? So those organizations can help fill that gap. Really excited to just continue that work. And I'll have a lot more to report on that next week, because I am going to EarnCon next week in New Orleans. So should be a really cool conference. I expect to learn a lot and connect with a lot of good organizers and researchers and other folks in the movement who are just trying to build worker power. And we'll talk about it next week when we get back.
All right, that's going to be it for us this week, folks. TVLR.fm is our website. You can sign up to our newsletters, donate to the show, buy our merch, donate to our fundraiser, all of that good stuff, TVLR.fm. got some good stuff lined up for you for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be talking to a worker from Ultium next week and the UAW servicing representative for that area over there. So looking forward to that conversation. Lots of good stuff coming up, so make sure that you continue to listen, you subscribe, you like the show, give us a 5-star rating, all of that good stuff. So
yeah, give us the 5-star rating and encourage your friends to do the same. Share our stuff on social media. Liking and sharing is free. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really does help. So we really appreciate all the support. Thank you to everyone who does listen and tune in and share our stuff. It does mean a lot to us. This is a grassroots operation, and we couldn't do it without your support.
That's right. All power to the workers.